think we're live. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Glad to see some familiar faces in the chat here. How's everybody doing today? So, I'm going to start just kind of, at the beginning here and let you know who the heck I am and what's going on here. So, this is the first live stream that we've put on for Skeleton. So, hopefully everything goes smoothly, fingers crossed. We're going to do our best here. But just to kind of give you a little bit of an intro of who I am. So, of course, my name is Chris Simmons. I am the creator and core maintainer currently for Skeleton. I've been doing, front-end work and things like that for 20 years now. I've worked, front-end design, UX, you name it, anything front-end I've kind of touched over the, there's many years. So I come from a background working in a variety of different industries as well. So I've worked for large media companies and really over the last 10 years, different startups and things like that. So that's me. Real quick, I do want to introduce you to kind of Skeleton, right? And so that's kind of what we're trying to talk about here today. So the general ideas, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over here so you can see. Yeah. So, this is Skeleton. We started the project about a year ago. If you've ever kind of been in a situation where you're kind of trying to migrate stacks and things like that, that's kind of the gist of where we were when we kind of started things. I was working for a company called Brain and Bones. We were trying to move from an Angular stack over to Svelte and that kind of thing. And we just, we kind of looked at the market and said, okay, well, there's not really a UI framework or component library or whatever that really fulfills our needs. So general idea is we wanted to just kind of, build that. So initially it was just going to be like an internal project. It was going to be something that we just, created to fulfill the need for the few products that we built. It was a, kind of a SaaS company. We had different products, some, online games and stuff like that. And so we needed something that we could kind of build rapidly, iterate on really quickly. We could, maybe change the themes up between different applications and stuff like that. And so in February last year, we started kind of building what would become, what Skeleton is today. And so originally the project didn't even have a name. We just called it component library or our component library or something like that. So it was very, just kind of, we had some ideas that we might open source it and it might become a bigger thing. So we kind of, we had the gist of that early on. But, fast forward to, I guess it would have been about around May or so, we had a pretty solid, version of the library up and running. It was enough to have called a library, if you will. And so we had enough to kind of put that together. And then, fast forward to August, we decided to make the call that we were ready to put this out, out there in the public. So Skeleton went open source in August, and the reception has been, pretty good, honestly. We've I wasn't sure if this was going to be one of the things where you kind of put out there, put a lot of work into it, you put it out there, and, maybe some people see it, maybe some people use it, a handful of people here or there, that kind of thing. And, again, the reception has been overwhelming. People are just, coming in. We've got, several members of the community here in chat today, several people that are moderators or contributors or that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been a really cool experience to see this kind of come to fruition. And so, fast forward, we're now March, it's just past the 1 year anniversary of the launch, or the start of the project. And we are finally, putting the 1.0 out there for all of you. And so super excited to just kind of, get it in your hands and let you see it and, try it out and let it be stable and production ready and ready to go. So it's, we just actually hit a really big milestone today, which is 1,400 stars on GitHub. So super excited about that. Again, the response has been overwhelming. I never expected this many people to come on and give it a even give it a consideration, much less use it. So it's just been the coolest experience. Thank you everybody for trying it out. So let's talk a little bit more about the project itself, and welcome you to what's going on here. And I know I keep saying I am new to streaming, you guys, so you just kind of bear with me here. I'm doing my best. Nerves are a little, got me a little rattled here, but just give me some time. I'll settle into it, that kind of thing. But I do want to, show you what Skeleton is, because that's what you're all here for. I'm sure plenty of you have used it if you're on the stream, if you're checking this out today. But there may be a few folks that are, just brand new and they don't know what it is. And so if you haven't used it, it's a UI, we describe it as a UI toolkit for Svelte and Tailwind. And so if you don't know what that means, it's, we're trying to merge the best of both of those technologies to build a UI system that is flexible and adaptive and just really easy to use, because that's one of the benefits that attracted us, at the company that I was working for, to, Svelte and to Tailwind, which was how do we kind of keep that productivity up? How do we ship faster? How do we do that kind of thing? And so we built this with that kind of goal in mind of how do we rapidly iterate on this? How do we, make it easy? How do we get the UI library where it just does what it needs to do and it gets out of the way? So that's where we started. We had a general idea of like what kind of components we wanted to have, and what sort of core features we wanted to have. We wanted it to be themable, and we wanted it to be that kind of thing. And we wanted it to be accessible, because accessibility is a major component of any kind of front end interaction. So I don't know, everybody's situation, but I have folks in my life that have disabilities and things like that. And so it's a very personal thing for me to ensure that the UI that we're putting out there is accessible and easy to use for all users. And so those were sort of the core tenets that we set about. And the product that we've built from that is what you kind of see here. So I've got the homepage pulled up here. This is our documentation site. And what this does is it just kind of walks you through. Obviously, you see a few previews of a few of the components and things like that. And we just kind of talk through some of the features that we've introduced. So we have components, which of course have their own state and things like that, built with Svelte. We've got actions, which are Svelte actions that you can use for all kinds of things. Like we use them for things like focus capture and these kind of really cool image filters that you're seeing on the screen here and things like that. And then you also have utility features, which are kind of a combination of things. It's styling, it's component and functionality and logic, and maybe even in some cases some external dependencies or something like that. So we have something like code blocks, and we have highlight.js to do some of the syntax highlighting and things like that. So if you haven't seen the new website, we just launched that yesterday. So this is something you can go on, just skeleton.dev, and you will see, be able to interact with this and try some of this stuff out. But Svelte, we show a little bit on the Svelte and SvelteKit side, and then we also show a little bit on the Tailwind side. So when we talk Tailwind, it's something that if you've never used Tailwind, if you're new to this sort of thing, or you're new to Tailwind specifically, it can be something that can kind of turn a lot of people off. It's really hard to, explain it in a way that, makes sense. But like my personal kind of anecdote that I like to give folks is to say that, I hated it when I first looked at it. I was like, this is like inline styles that I saw 20 years ago when I was doing, starting my career. And this is what we've been trying to avoid for the longest time. I hate it. Let's not do that. And so I kind of shied away from it at first. But when we started building Skeleton, we needed a solution for styles, and we needed, some way to handle theming and light and dark mode and things like that. And so I gave it a bit of a shot. And what I found out was really that it's an awesome tool for building or already including utility classes, which are something that I was building myself personally from project A to project B to, on and on and on. But every time I was kind of reinventing the wheel. I was kind of having to, build my margin classes and build my, border classes and, buttons and so on and so forth. And that's where it was, it clicked. I was like, oh, I get all of this. It's turnkey, but yet I can still customize it. And, all of that was really cool. And so that kind of, changed my opinion on it. I flipped on it and decided, let's give this a go. And what we've done is actually kind of interesting with Skeleton in that we're using it different ways. So one of the easiest ways to kind of compare it is something to like a Flowbyte or Tailwind UI or something like that, where we kind of have these like, or Daisy or something like that, where you have these kind of canned styles that you can apply. So if you have buttons or you have a container element like a card or badges or something like that, these things that you use quite often, we just keep those as CSS because that's really the easiest way to handle those. Like having to import a button component for every page gets a little bit cumbersome. Having to do that for containers and so on and so forth, it gets to be a little bit of a pain in the rear. So we keep that stuff CSS so that it's easy to use. So that's our elements. We also kind of lean straight into what Tailwind provides as far as the theming system, because they have this, array. You have your default palette, but you can extend that really easily through a Tailwind plugin or what have you. And so we do that. And we kind of tie this into what's called like a design token or something along those lines, design token system. I'll talk about that in just a second, so I'll circle back to that. But the general idea is we kind of give you a smaller but limited palette that just should cover most grounds. But if you need to, you can extend it. And we might cover some of that today too. And then the final kind of thing I just want to mention real quick is just, of course, built-in support for light and dark mode. Like the example here is you can see this, you can toggle the site and see everything is just quickly adapted. And that's just one theme that's powering that. It just easily kind of toggles between those two. And what's powering that is just Tailwind's, standard light and dark mode. So just a really easy thing to implement and adjust and even control on your own. It's not something you have to figure out our convention on. If you already know how to do it in Tailwind, you understand kind of what the gist is going on here. Excuse me. So the other part to kind of cover here is I kind of mentioned the design token system and stuff like that. So this is kind of something, again, we'll kind of go through some examples here in a little bit. I want this to be kind of interactive and kind of show you what I'm talking about. But the general idea is we use a system that takes a theme, which is built up of your CSS, like CSS properties, like variables, that kind of thing. And then we adapt those to classes, which kind of ingest that. And then that becomes, the design tokens. And then we use the design tokens inside of our components. And that kind of sets the ground for the basic styles that you kind of adapt throughout the entire system. And so you can quickly kind of see, if we put a couple examples here of like the flexibility of what you can do with the design, right? Like you can really kind of play with it and, stretch it. And even just the site itself, like I can switch between a couple different themes here and you can see the entire site just updates right away. Like some of these things that were like maybe a little more boxy here on another theme become very rounded. The colors change. All of that stuff happens, really quickly and really easily. And with light and dark mode kind of built in for either method there. So it's really pretty cool. Like it's taken a lot of time and effort, I will say, to kind of get to that point that, it's been a system we've worked on and iterated on and grown, into a point that we feel really confident in that it's a pretty capable system. And so, some of the comments I get sometimes are like, oh, Skeleton, it's cool, but I don't really like the look. And, that's where I want to kind of like jump through the screen and be like, but you can make it look however you want. So, it's that kind of thing. But, and again, this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to show and demo in a little bit. So I just want to kind of lead into that a little bit. Okay. And then I won't go through every bullet point and everything else on the website here. Just know that, the project is open source. It's under the MIT license, which means you can really kind of do whatever you want with it. We have, really built the whole thing to be community driven and community owned, which means, folks like you in chat or watching can come in and contribute. Like, if there's a feature that we're missing or that you would like to add or whatever, like we kind of deal with that all the time. Like, people coming in and saying, hey, I'd really love to have this feature or that feature. And if it makes sense, we'll get it in just, as soon as we can, that kind of thing. And so there's quite a few features inside of Skeleton that have been driven through requests or suggestions or that kind of thing. And even like full features, like our CLI that I'll show in a minute for setting up the project, that was completely contributed by, one of our top contributors, who is, Nick, or Nick Tech, as you might know him from Discord. So really cool stuff. We're very proud of our community and, everybody watching. So thank you for everybody to, helping us kind of get to that point. And then, of course, like, the thing that comes up a lot is the comparisons of, like, what is Skeleton to Daisy or Flowbyte or Material Design or something like that. And so that's the part where we have to say, well, we do similar stuff, but we're a little bit adjacent or a little off from that. And so, especially Flowbyte and Daisy or something like that, those are very Tailwind heavy. And so you're going to notice that those have like HTML and CSS as they provide to you, and then you take that and tweak that or whatever. But, we do that in addition to also, having the Svelte components and the Svelte side of things. So if you're, building towards a project that's going to be Svelte or SvelteKit based, a lot of times you don't want to have to do that process of like converting those, visual components into functional components. And so that's one of the things we can save and save you some time for. And then the others are, I mentioned material and carbon and stuff like that. Those are more kind of general purpose. They're, they're not framework specific. They're for any kind of framework. And then they have sort of the forks or, plugins that you can use to make those work within those. And so we are a little closer to maybe something like Mantine, if you're familiar from the React space. So just purpose built for, one particular framework, and just trying to take, make best use of the features that are provided from that. So, all right. And then the next part I want to talk about here is, of course, our exciting news for today, which is the launch. So if you've been on our, Twitter or Discord or whatever, you've probably seen the announcement. I'm sure nobody installed this early yesterday, right? Totally. So if you did, cool. I'm hoping everything's working out really well for you. But, I wanted to kind of quickly touch on some of the things that we put out there because there is some interesting stuff that we've done with, especially the documentation. So if you've, used our documentation in the past, obviously the homepage is, had a bit of a glow up, right? But various sections within the documentation have also been updated. So there's a few things here as far as, being able to just go through the structure of a particular feature. So if we go to avatars or something like that, just at a glance, have all this information here at the top of what you're looking for. Like, what is it? What does it do? How do I import it? You can be able to see the source code for that particular feature if you want to see how it was built. We now have lots of examples, which is really cool. So, the previous versions, have you seen that? It was like we were kind of explaining everything, and it was a lot of code snippets just kind of thrown at you and that kind of thing. But this version, it's very much, we're trying to show and, and tell at the same kind of, at the same time, that kind of thing. So the new preview component lets you quickly find the snippet that's powering the example you're seeing, which is, it's really cool. It's a fun way to kind of get in there and try that out. And of course, this is interactive. So if you want to try on different backgrounds or something like that, all that sort of stuff works really well. A couple other kind of cool additions. Well, yeah, the interactive examples here. There's a few of these where we actually make that where you can kind of change out the styling and things like that. So we'll cover some of the colors and stuff like that in just a moment. But if you're kind of curious kind of what something looks like in a different style or a different color or whatever, you can try a lot of that stuff out just really quickly on the docs. So just a nice kind of quality of life improvement there. And then, of course, we've really, you know, beefed up the information. Had a huge community effort to come in and, you know, make the copy really well. So, like, you know, explain stuff and there's no typos and, you know, that kind of thing. So just making sure that the information's accurate and informative and, you know, helps you out. And then the other kind of big thing is just the new search. We've got a new search that's just it's a little nicer to look at, a little easier to navigate with keyboard shortcuts and that kind of thing. But really, like, as far as the library itself, if you've been using Skeleton in the pre-release versions, what you're going to really find is just this stuff down here, which is just some polish, some bug fixes, that kind of thing. We really wanted to go from release candidate to the, you know, V1 and not introduce any kind of break-in changes, make this very easy for you, and just be able to just hit the ground running with a nice, stable, production-ready version of the library. So that's pretty much where we are. Just if you're kind of curious what the expectations are with V1, we've kind of outlined a little bit of that here too as well. So general idea is that the whole point of going to V1 is that it's a major release and we want stability. We want you to have the confidence to use this in production. If you haven't already been, whether you're using a small project or your company or, you know, whatever you need to do with it, we want to make sure that it's working the way you want it to, you know, you need it to do. That doesn't mean the library's perfect. We still have some, you know, there's going to be bugs and there's going to be some small issues here or there. We're still working on that kind of thing, and we'll continue to push out regular maintenance updates. So don't think, you know, we're just done and you know, we're hitting the road. We're out of here. We're done, or anything like that. But so expect that. I don't know if right now it's going to be every 2 weeks like we've been doing. We'll kind of figure that out. We'll kind of settle into that. Especially this first go, we've got a lot of kind of prep stuff we need to do now that the release is out. You know, promoting stuff, letting anybody know that, hey, this thing exists and that kind of thing. So, but we'll keep you posted. We'll let you know when when we feel the next update is kind of coming. And then the other thing is we're not going to limit and prevent from, you know, new features from being introduced. We in fact have several queued up or partially complete that just didn't make the cut for V1. Stuff like a new like autocomplete component, which I know a lot of people have been looking forward to. Some updates to the range slider, things like that. But these will be changes that are extra capabilities and not necessarily like an overhaul like we've been doing for some of the previous releases. So no major breaking changes, no major changes to the API or structure for the features, that kind of thing. And then, of course, the exciting thing with, at least on my side, is that this kind of opens the door for me to move on to working on some of our Skeleton Labs projects. So we'll be talking about Skeleton Labs in just a little bit. But if you're not aware of that, it's the company that we kind of run alongside the open source project. And so we'll be kind of talking through what that's going to bring. So stuff like, some templates and things like that you can get. Some really, really cool stuff here in the near future. So if you're interested in that, make sure you kind of stay in for that talking a little bit later. But for now, I'm going to step away for just a moment. So we'll go ahead and pull up just a screen just to take a little break. And then I'm going to actually bring on one of the core contributors, core team members, Dominik, if you know him from either GitHub or Discord, to help me kind of talk through and walk through the process of just kind of getting started with Skeleton, like installing a project. We have a few options, including a new option that's just launched with V1. So I'll be demonstrating that live, of course. I'm sure nothing will go wrong, so we'll see. But, it should be exciting. And even if if you've used Skeleton and you've installed stuff before, I still think this is going to be valuable for you in that we're going to kind of explain the reason why you have to do some of the steps that we do. So whether it's why do you import this style sheet, or why do you change this particular setting in the Tailwind config, or something like that. We'll be kind of covering all of that, as well as the new CLI and some other fun stuff. So please stick around. We'll be back in probably less than just, maybe 5 minutes tops, that kind of thing. So be right back. See you in a sec. So, like I mentioned before we left, the general idea here is that we're going to be going through this with this kind of onboarding process with Dominik. And so let me go ahead and get him set up where you can see him. There we go. He should be on the screen. Say hi, Dominik.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
So if you don't know, Dom's been just the best moderator that we've ever had. You know, not that we've had a million, but he's been so good because so many of you guys come in, you have questions, you need help, that kind of thing. Dom has been right there just helping answer a lot of those questions, helping kind of push you in the right direction, that kind of stuff. I'm sure many of you have interacted with him. But I wanted to bring on Dom today because when we talk onboarding, it's such a crucial part of, you know, the whole process because it's your first kind of foray into new software, right? And so this is where a lot of people kind of get tripped up or they have issues or, you know, something along those lines. And so what we want to do is just kind of walk you through that process again, like I was saying earlier, and just let you see kind of what it looks like to kind of set this up. And so whether you're new or you're excuse me, an existing user, I think there's some value here. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to switch over so you guys can see what I see here. And I'm going to do my best to kind of keep what I'm talking about on screen. So Dom has been, you know, I've told him to just yell at me if you guys can't see what what I'm talking about. So let one of us know. We will switch and kind of make sure this is in a good place. But general idea is we have kind of this getting started section on the website. If you come to the new site, you can just hit the get started button here or just kind of navigate to it here. And so this first version, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to install the project completely from scratch. And so what that means is we're going to be doing a few things. We're going to be first installing SvelteKit through the CLI that they provide. We're going to install Skeleton, the actual package for our library. We're going to be installing Tailwind using a really cool tool called SvelteAdd. And then we're going to kind of show like what you know, how do you get your style sheets in, how do you configure your theme, you know, and you know, of course, how do you get it on the screen and actually see what you're doing. So I'm going to start doing this while this is going here. You should be seeing the console here, and I'm just going to kind of paste this in. So actually, I'm not going to do it here.
I think you need to. Perfect.
Yeah, there's going to be a little delay for Dom, so just bear with us here. And so this is another kind of cool update for today for the V1 launch is Nick, who I mentioned created the CLI, has put out a new update to use Clank? I can't quite remember. The new kind of prompting library by Nate Moore of the Astro team. So it's a really cool, just kind of visual update to the CLI and just makes it a little easier to see what you're doing and see the options. And so just to kind of get started here, I'm just going to choose a skeleton project, which is not related to us. This just means this is what Svelte uses as their kind of bare bones empty project. We're going to choose that. I'm going to go ahead and enable TypeScript just because we recommend it for skeleton. You can use it without, but just know that most of our examples are in TypeScript. It's just our preference, okay? I'm not going to install any of the optional kind of stuff because we're not going to be using linting or prettier or any of that on this demonstration. So I'm just going to skip through that. And then it's going to provide a few steps here. So I'm going to jump into the new folder here. I'm going to run npm install to install the dependencies. And then, I'm not going to create a get init or do any of that just because we're not going to be saving that. This is just going to be a temporary thing that we just kind of run through real quick. And then I can run dev, get the local server. I know they have the flag to open it up in the browser automatically, but I just never do that. This is just me being old school, I guess. And so there we have it. I'm sure you guys have seen this. This is just your bare bones, empty SvelteKit project. A few commands, you have it up and running, very easy. Now, nothing too crazy there. So the next part I'm going to do here is just go ahead and stop the server here. So I'm going to come back over, stop the server. If my keyboard would work, there we go. And we'll go ahead and just kind of drop in the next little command here, which is the the installation for Skeleton itself. So I'm gonna grab that, drop that in here, and that's going to install that. And then we'll go ahead and do a couple other steps just because it's easier to just kind of do this while we're in the while we're in the terminal. And so we're going to use the Svelte add option here to install Tailwind, and I'll show you kind of what that's doing to our project in just a second. And then since I put a couple new items in, we're going to need to do an npm install just to make sure Tailwind is actually installed locally and that kind of thing. And so with that in place, I'm going to jump over to our VS Code instance here and just kind of talk through what we just did there. Okay. So the first thing we did was we installed Skeleton, which goes into our node modules, of course. So that just means it's available for us to use within the project. It's not configured, it's not set up and ready to go yet. It's just ready to go, it's just installed. And then the next part here, and this is, one of the first things that kind of trips folks up, is that we use SvelteAdd to install Tailwind, and that does a few things. So that'll set up things like your config file here, and I'm going to zoom in a little so you guys can see that on the stream. Sets up your Tailwind config file, which has some basic defaults and things like that in place. I actually noticed they've made a couple changes since last time I've looked, so we'll talk through that in just a second. That's really cool. It also goes ahead. I think if your app.postcss may already be there, but if not, it'll create one. And this is just your global style sheet. So you'll see, some stuff here. Oh, you know what? That's why it's doing that. I'm in the wrong project because I'm a dummy. Okay, let me open our new project. Doing stuff right.
I thought it was on purpose.
Yeah, Dom's just over there laughing. Oh, good. That's good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, VS Code. So again, Tailwind config, nice and empty. So they haven't changed anything. I'm just going crazy. We also have our, there we go. Our global style sheet here, which is the app.postcss file. You'll see a couple files in here, so we're going to talk about those in just a second. And then if you have a root layout, that'll be imported there. So that's all kind of ready to go. So just a few things. There's also like the postcss config, and they drop Tailwind in there. And that just means that, Tailwind will process and run with, whatever's needed to for the postcss side of things. So one line command, and you get all of that done without having to kind of configure that yourself and figure out where the files go and all that fun stuff. So just makes things a little easier. But one of the downsides is unfortunately is that SvelteAdd drops these into your postcss or your app.postcss file, which is good if you're not using Skeleton because you need these directives installed and you may want to extend the use of Tailwind and maybe use the base layer or components layer or something like that to apply some things within their kind of scope or layering system inside of Tailwind. We don't actually encourage this. We actually need you to remove these for our project, so we just recommend coming here and delete that. And the reason for that is that we will import our own style sheet for Skeleton in just a moment, and it just already includes that. So this would be redundant, and that can actually cause some errors, which, as Dom and I have seen,
just a couple.
Yeah, it's tripped a few folks up, and so especially early days before we had the CLI, this was one of the things like every morning we'd come on and somebody would be having this kind of issue or something like that. So it's something where we maybe need to reach out to SvelteAdd and just say, hey, is there a way you can put a flag where we can disable this or something like that? So something we might look at in the future. But just know if those get added, just go ahead and nuke those. The other thing we're going to need to do is to kind of start putting in Skeleton itself. Is we'll have you open up your Tailwind config file here. There's a few sections in here, and we really just need 3 things added here. So we need the first thing. I'm just going to go ahead and paste this whole little snippet in here. So I'm just grabbing that from the install instructions on the other screen, in case you're wondering. And so, I've kind of labeled the 3 changes we've made here. The first one is this right here, applying dark mode. So what this does in your Tailwind config is it sets the way that Tailwind handles your dark mode. I think it trips up a few folks that they think this turns on dark mode, but that's not quite the case. Instead, it changes from the default, which is your OS preference. So when the page loads, the browser will look at your OS preference, or is your OS in light mode or dark mode, and adopt the page for that. Whereas this mode, class mode, means that it can be handled with a class that's set on or off on your root HTML element in your kind of not index file, but app.html file for a SvelteKit project. This one right here, this little bit right here. And so we like to encourage that, because we offer some components and some features that allow you to toggle that really easily for the user's preference. And so we will not only toggle that class using this class system, but we'll also persist that value into local storage so that the next time the user visits, your site or whatever, that they're on the preferred theme, the one they wanted. Okay. The next thing we have you add is within this content section. So the content section is kind of interesting in that the way the Tailwind compiler, for lack of a better term, works is it searches through files and looks for references using the Tailwind utility classes. And so those classes may be in different types of files. You might have some in HTML files, maybe you have some in your JavaScript files or Svelte files or what have you. And so by default, you get this line right here, which is just searching for those types of files and looking for utility classes in those. But the kind of tricky bit is when you install Skeleton, it's in your node modules folder, right? Remember we talked about that up here. And so that kind of trips things up in that if you try to launch and view the new project right now, you wouldn't have any of Skeleton styling or any of that would work, just because it doesn't know where those styles are. And so this next little bit that looks kind of scary is just searching for your node modules folder and searching for those same types of files. And so again, another thing that kind of trips people up, they maybe come in here and delete this and kind of replace the base version, or they fail to add this or just something like that. So just be real careful if you're doing the manual install that you get this on here as well.
Funny story on the side. While I was starting with Skeleton, we only had the manual install.
Yeah.
And I was cursing for 5 to 10 minutes until I finally noticed that part of the Tailwind section.
Yeah. And that was, I think it's good that we're kind of sitting here and talking through this, because it kind of explains some of the reasoning for why you're implementing these changes. And just know, we don't necessarily want you to have to change all of this stuff. If there's a way we can automate this or make this easier for you, that's kind of always been our goal from the start, because there's always room for I screw stuff up all the time. So even if it's the same thing you've done 100 times, it's really easy to forget the setting or forget that thing. And of course, if if Svelte evolves or Tailwind evolves and updates, and this kind of stuff is no longer a requirement, then we're going to remove this, as fast as we can, because we want to streamline that process and make this easy for you. But currently, this is the way it works. This is why we have to have it, and just so you know, okay? And then the last little bit in the config file here is just bringing in our plugin. And so the plugin does quite a lot of effort, a lot of work within Skeleton. It does things like insert our design tokens, which, again, I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit. It brings in the theming system. So when we start talking about importing a theme, you're going to see both where the theme colors live and then how those going to get injected so that Tailwind itself can understand those. So if you're setting a background utility class or border class that has a color or something like that, that comes from the themes that are coming from this particular plugin. So just, of course, we got to get that in there. It has a little funky format, so just with the little dots and the little parentheses at the end. So just make sure you get that just like we shot, and you should be good to go. And then really there's only, one or two more small steps there we need to do, which is to go into our root layout. So we go into routes layout here. And right now we only have our post CSS file. We only have our global style sheet, right? But we actually need 3 all together. So I'm just going to copy this again from the website off screen here. And I'm going to, again, just kind of talk through each of these. So the first one here is easy. This is a preset theme that we provide. It's the skeleton theme, the one you were seeing on the website with the kind of nice, bluish gray background and that kind of thing. We have our all.css, which is basically everything that we can't fit into the plugin. It comes through this. So this is going to be some of the element styles like buttons and container stuff like cards and things like that. That's going to come through your all CSS. And then the last bit is just, again, making sure you keep that post CSS, the global style sheet, and do that last. We want this particular order so that everything kind of works the way it needs to. We have the theme first, and then all the style sheets kind of sandwich in the middle, and then at the very end we have your style sheet. So if you need to overwrite anything that comes before that, you can. So order is important here. Just be careful with that, okay? And real quick, I'm going to actually switch over to the skeleton project, and I'm going to show you what all CSS is doing, because this is this could be a little scary for folks. They're like, what is this? What does this contain? What is or isn't inside of that? So just real quickly, I'm going to kind of show you what the contents of that is, which is just, again, a few imports here. We were talking about those Tailwind directives. Those have to kind of come first in the list. So that's the first thing it imports. Core CSS is stuff like your background color, scroll bars, that kind of thing. Typography is, as you would expect, headings and paragraphs and that kind of stuff. Elements are going to be all of your like cards and buttons and that sort of thing. And then variants are ways to kind of add sort of preset or canned styles to like buttons and cards and that kind of thing. So just so you have some idea of like, when I say like, we try to make it as simple as possible. Putting this all in one style sheet is important because the order of these kind of matters a little bit. And so instead of you having to juggle, what is that, a half dozen different style sheets, we've just kind of compressed it all down into one. We're trying to make it, again, as easy as possible.
Sebas just mentioned something very important in chat as well. There's a plugin that can reorder your imports in VS Code. And you need to be very, very careful with that to not get all CSS too early or too late.
Yeah. So be careful about that. I have seen a couple people where the style sheets are in a different order, and it could be maybe that's why. That would kind of explain that. So hey, something to put in the documentation, right? So good to know. Thank you, Sebas, for letting us know that. But again, we've got the style sheets set up, and so really the only thing we need to we're pretty much ready to go. If I switch back over to our documentation, I'll just kind of show you that process. We've installed the first couple bits here. We've got Tailwind. We've got the style sheets in place. And then if you want, you can switch to another theme, which we'll show you in just a second. But other than that, we're ready to go. I don't have my dev server running, so I'm going to kind of quickly come over here and do npm run dev.
You also just quickly scrolled past the big warning we already have for, hey, these import orders are important.
Yeah. We try to, like I said, we try to let you know. But if we come back over to the local page, you can see some stuff has changed. It's similar to what it was before, but there's some styling going on. We've got a little green, kind of deal going on. But we have a big problem here, and that is that we're currently in light theme, and nobody likes light theme except for Rich Harris. So we have to fix this real quick. So the fix is actually really easy. Since we put the Tailwind configuration into the class mode, we can just come into our HTML element and then just add class, dark. And what that's going to do, it's just going to hard code that straight over to, there we go, to our dark theme. So we have a nice and, pleasant to the eyes. We don't need to put sunglasses on while we're developing, ready to go, easy to look at. And it's okay if you want to toggle between those. If you want to kind of make the default light, you can kind of leave that off, or, vice versa. You don't have to use, this is something that kind of is interesting. I see a lot of people do. A lot of people kind of see that you can toggle and they feel like they have to toggle light and dark, but there's really no requirement for that. If you want to just do just a light theme or just a dark theme, by all means, do that. Just the quickest and easiest way to do that is, again, just come in here and set or remove that little dark class right there on your HTML element. Okay?
Did you actually? Yes. I'm silent.
The delay. I know.
The delay. I'm so sorry.
So, okay. And then, so that's pretty much the process for getting a manual project set up. Like if I wanted to, I could come into my layout here and maybe come over to the skeleton docs, and then we can grab, let's not even do that. Let's just stay on the page here. And I'm going to just switch here, and I'm going to just put a button on the page, right? So if I do button, let's see, why is my IntelliSense not working? Oh well. There we go, button. So I'm going to save that. We look at the page. We've got a nice tiny little button up there in the corner. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add the class that says button. And I'm going to use, I know we're skipping ahead a little bit, but I just want to make it look nice. So I'm going to put a style on here and then switch back. And then we do have a button here. And that just kind of quickly confirms that, yeah, skeleton's working, the styles are working, everything's kind of going the way we want it to, okay? So that's the manual install. Like, it took, I didn't quite time us there, but it took a few minutes for us to kind of get through that and you know, get through that process and install stuff. If you're actually just sitting down, just following the steps, it's probably just a couple minutes. Don't take, you know, me demoing this as the, you know, oh my gosh, it's going to take me 30 minutes to kind of get started with this kind of thing. It's really not that. It's very quick and easy. You know, it's one page. You can get through it pretty easily. But if you want an easier start, especially like if you're starting a fresh new project, this is where the CLI is going to come in. And so I'm going to switch to this real quick. And then I'm going to come over to our CLI here. And I'm going to come up. And then I'm just going to actually remove that project we just created. And we're going to recreate it in the CLI. And we're going to do that just so that you can see, you know, just kind of compare what the differences are and how much quicker it is to kind of get started. So if we come back here, the first thing you're going to see on the documentation is there's so many less steps to go through, right? So like really you just kind of run the command and then the other steps are just telling you, we've done this for you. We've done this for you. We've done this for you, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm going to grab this little command here, which is skeleton app, the latest, and then whatever you want the name of the project. So you can change that if you want. It's very familiar to the SvelteKit CLI if you've ever used that. I'm going to drop that into my terminal here, and then we're going to go through the experience. And so you're going to see, just like SvelteKit, we're now using the new prompt system, so it looks really nice. I'm going to say, yes, I want to use TypeScript. No to these optional things. We're not doing testing or any of that here. We do kind of give you a couple extra prompts that the SvelteKit CLI does not provide, which are for things that are like optional dependencies that you might use. So I'm going to just skip those for now. And then we might use forms, so I'm going to toggle that on. But Tailwind provides a few optional plugins as well for things like form styling, typography styles, you know, things like that. And you can optionally use those alongside Skeleton. So I'm gonna select that, and then here you can quickly like choose which theme you want to use. Of course, let's go with the classic here. And then we offer two options. Do you want to have a kind of an empty project that doesn't really have anything in it, or do you want a welcome screen? And so I'm going to go ahead and choose the welcome screen just to have a few things set up on the page for us by default. So select that. You can see you don't even have to run the install command. We do all that for you. The project is being set up. We're installing SvelteKit. We're installing Tailwind. We're installing the plugin. We're doing all those things that we just covered in the manual process. We're just doing that for you. And you can see there's this comes up on some, if you're on certain OSs and things like that, this kind of red message that looks really scary. We're working on fixing that stuff. It's just a warning. It doesn't impact your ability to use this. Just disregard for now, okay? And if it does bother you, just pester Nick. He's the one to fix that.
Very important thing to note. That's the only moment you're going to have to interact with the skeleton CLI. After that, it's gone. It's
gone.
React, create app, nothing.
And so I'm going to do run, and then we're going to come in here and just preview it. Like we haven't even looked at the code. We've just installed it. I'm going to drop this in my browser. it's already there. There it is. There's our basic page. And so, again, the CLI has done a lot of the heavy lifting for us in that it's just doing those exact same steps but automating that for you, which again is one of the big goals we have. We just want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for you to get in and get started, because if you're anything like us, we just want to be productive. So I'm going to go ahead and I've pulled up the project itself so we can do a quick comparison. So here's our Tailwind config. You can see there's the extra path, there's the dark mode, there's our our plugin with the extra Tailwind plugin that we were prompted for. If we come and look at our global style sheet, there we go. We've got all of those. We've actually added a couple extra styles here just to help with the app shell, which is the page layout component that we provide. So I'll talk about that in just a sec. And then if we come in and look at the actual layout, you can see it's imported those different CSS imports here. We're actually importing a couple components from Skeleton, such as the app bar and the app shell, like I was just saying. We've got all those kind of configured on the page. And if we look at our page, we've got some stuff that we say you can delete here. And that's just going to be this kind of content right here in the middle. That stuff that just kind of helping you get started, like welcome and where the routes are to edit and that kind of thing. And so if I want, I can come in here and delete this real quick. And I know I'm off screen. I'll just be 1 second here. There we go. And I'm going to save that and start the server. There we go. There we go. And so I've just deleted most of that content and just left a little hello message there. So if we switch back over to the code, that's all I've done. I've just changed that really quickly for us, just to see that things are updating and the server's live and that kind of thing. And so if we want, we can actually come into the layout and maybe edit the, we don't want those links up in the top right corner. I can just kind of nix this stuff, save that, and then those links up here are gone. Just however we want to kind of get started and kind of get rolling. And so, we don't necessarily force the app shell for you to use. We do encourage it if you're new to Skeleton. If you've never used Skeleton and you just kind of want a quick and easy way to kind of get a header at the top and work with sidebars and footers and stuff like that. And so, if you're kind of curious about that, we do have documentation on that, of course. You can come over here to Svelte and App Shell, and we show a little demo of kind of what that's doing for you on the page. So you can see there's different slots that you can enable or disable that adds more or less, sections for you to display on the page. So if you just want kind of the standard, I want a header, a sidebar, and a page, you just need a couple slots enabled for that. Okay. And then the other thing we've got going on here is that we have, so let me grab my screen. Yeah, and then the other thing to kind of just take note is how quickly we were able to set all that stuff up, right? Like we were able to do that in, literally a few command prompts and it's ready to go. But even if there's something you still need to tweak or change, or like there's a setting you don't like, all of that stuff is still made available to you. So like a good example of that is if we come back over to the documentation and I go to install, yeah. We have these different themes that you can kind of preview on the site. So like maybe if we wanted to do something different, we could change the theme. And so we make this very easy. You can just click the theme you want and we show you the import statement. And so you can see, oh, it's instead of theme skeleton, it's theme modern. And so I'm going to switch over here and I'm going to go back to my code and just change this little import here for the preset theme. We can change that over to modern, save that. And when we look at the page, there we have it. It's now purple as opposed to what it was before. And then I'm going to change one other quick setting here, which we show inside of the documentation, which is this little attribute you can put on your body element. And this just adds a few extra bits. So fonts, background colors, that kind of thing. So our background gradients, I should say. So I'm going to open the app.html file, come into my body. You can see it's still set to skeleton. So I'm going to set that to modern here, save that. And then when I switch back, we now have this kind of nice gradient. The fonts are a little bit different and that kind of thing. So the data theme is just a way to opt in to those extra little bits and pieces that we provide as part of the theme. You don't have to use them if you want to do your own fonts or you want to do your own kind of background design or something like that around the preset theme. It's kind of an opt-in feature for you, which is kind of cool.
Just to add to that, if you choose a different theme in the CLI, it will of course handle that too.
Yeah, and it'll change it in both places. It'll do the CSS import and also the data theme attribute on your for the extra bits. All right, and so again, that's another quick way to kind of get started. And then I'm going to show you just one more quick option that we've just launched as part of v1 this week, which is the StackBlitz option. So if you've never used StackBlitz, what it's doing is I can just click it and we can let it kind of run while I'm talking. And you're going to see it's going to open this kind of almost VS Code looking sort of editor page in my browser here. It's kind of doing some stuff down in the terminal. It's installing some stuff. And so I don't know the specific, Nick's in chat. He can probably talk to this a little better than I can. I don't know if they're using like web containers or something like that. But it's basically installing a version of Skeleton in this kind of remote fashion that you can just edit directly through the browser. And so within a few seconds, it's done all of the things that the CLI typically does for you. And you have that same sort of welcome page that we were just looking at. So really cool because, this is great if you're just wanting to like kick the tires, but you're not necessarily wanting to install everything, or you're not on your dev machine, or you're on a laptop and you're in transit or something like that. Like just quickly be able to test things out. And this is live and interactive. Like you can actually come in here and you can go to the page like we were talking about earlier, and I can grab some of the code here, and then I can say, hello. There we go. And then you can see, yep, there it is. So it's all updating in real time. They offer the ability to, they've changed the UI a little bit. They had a way, it's up here. You can open the preview in a full screen here. So you have two tabs. One's just your editor. One's the full screen version of the page. So you don't have to be all scrunched up if you're on a small laptop sized device or something like that. I think if we close this and open, it'll restore it back there on the side. So just a really kind of cool way to get started. But this is, and this is really kind of the kicker here, is if you get started and you kind of tinker with it and you figure out, you add something that you like, StackBlitz offers this option to sign in, and you'll see it's going to prompt me for, my GitHub login. You can connect to your GitHub and actually save this project to GitHub, to a repository in your own GitHub account. And so, while this kind of feels very like ephemeral and very like temporary, like you can actually save it, put it on GitHub and then clone that down on your workstation or whatever later, and then take that, all the way up to production if you want. So just a really cool way to get started. I'm so glad we have a few options now and we're not forcing everybody through the manual install, just because I know it's a little cumbersome and that kind of thing, but just a really neat way to get started and, get up and running in a very quick fashion. But, so that's the few ways we've got to kind of get started. So with that instead, I think we should show off, a little bit more of what Skeleton is and what it can do, right? So, real quick, I'm going to switch over to the documentation here, and I'm going to show you, these sections right here. So when you're kind of getting started with Skeleton, there may be a few things that you just don't understand of like, okay, I see this cool style that you're doing, or I see this like theme system where it's like changing the colors and doing some crazy stuff with that. Even the text color is changing depending on what the background color is, right? Like, how does some of that stuff work? And so we kind of put these under what we call the essentials here. And so these are, core concepts that are very useful to know before you start, dropping in buttons and dropping in avatars and building utility features and things like that. So I'm going to show you just a real quick kind of couple demos of these so that we're not just reading documentation, which is super exciting, I'm sure. So so we're going to take our little sample project that we've created here, and we're actually going to kind of build on it a little bit. We're going to put a couple things on the page and make it look a little neater, a little nicer. And so I mentioned earlier when we set up the Tailwind config, one of the things that the skeleton plugin within Tailwind is doing is implementing this theme color system, right? And so if you've ever set up just Tailwind on its own, you've probably done this where you go into the config and it'll be something like this. You go in here and then you like extend the theme and you add, colors and you do stuff inside of here. Like that's pretty cool. Like that's a way to do it. But, we want to make this very fast and easy for you. So what we provide here is just a set of, primary color, secondary color, success colors, surface colors, these kind of colors that sort of give you like some semantics around what they represent. And so that's, it's a limited palette, maybe compared to something like a Daisy or, some of these others out there. But we do that very intentionally because we want to kind of keep things simple. Most of the time, like if you're building branding for a company or something like that, they're not going to have 50 billion colors. Like they may have different shades of colors, but they don't necessarily have, unique colors. Like this is what I'm talking about. So these different shades. So like I have a bunch of different greens and a bunch of different blues and a bunch of different, so on and so forth. So we provide all that. And the way it works, it just ties right into the Tailwind utility system for that. And so you can kind of see the format here. And so let's kind of see that in practice. I'm going to jump over here and I'm make this text we have right here. I'm just going to add a class. And if you wanted to use like Tailwind's default colors, you might do orange and like the shade 500, save that. If we look at that, there we go. We get some a nice orange background there, right? Now, if we come back here and we change this to something like primary, which is not something that's built into Tailwind, we switch back on, like, look at that. You can see we have this nice kind of like theme color, specific value, which is the pink here, right? And in fact, if we switch here, modern, you're going to see that's what primary is. It's that pink looking tone. So we can do secondary and get this and tertiary and so on and so forth. And we give you, through the plugin, Tailwind gives you several different ways to utilize those colors. You can either do things where it's just you're creating a class and you're adding them like you would expect with a utility class here. You can do things like opacity. So the way we set up the colors, they're set up with RGB values, which is what Tailwind recommends to enable enable opacity with colors. So if I come back here, you can see this is fully solid. I come in here and do something like 10/10, so that's 10% opacity. We now have a very faint pink on that background there, right? So if I switch that, I'll leave that on that screen and go back to 50 and then back up to full, and then there you go. So it's changing as I change those values there. So one of the cool things we do, and the way we accomplish that, just in case you're kind of curious, is I'm going to switch over here and I'm going to open one of our themes. So this is the skeleton theme. So we provide, this is what an actual theme file looks like. There's a lot going on here. It's a little scary looking maybe, but the thing we're focusing on is where we're doing the 500 shade of our primary color, right? So that's right here. And this is just it's just a CSS property, or CSS variable as they're sometimes called. And so we're applying that, and then we're applying the color, which is originally a hex value here. It's just an RGB value of those, red, green, blue channel color version of that particular tone. And so by doing it in this kind of funky format where it's like three numbers and there's a space in between, that kind of thing, what they're doing with Tailwind behind the scene is they're taking that color and applying that with RGB, like the RGB color system. And so by doing that, you can also use RGBA. So if you add the alpha layer, the transparency layer, this is just your alpha right here, this little bit on the end. So just a kind of a neat way that's being handled. And then there's other ways you can use this. Tailwind provides the add apply system, so you can do this in your style sheets where you apply background color or text color or something like that. And then of course, if you want, you can use the raw values straight from our theme, because that's available in the it's imported as part of our here, I'll show you the app file. Proof layout. There we go. There we go. This file right here. So as part of importing the theme, all of those color values that I just showed you are available to us. And so if I come over here and do this, yeah, there we go. We can use the like I was talking about, the RGB value, the variable of that kind of named color value, and then if you want to do the alpha channel. So this is kind of like what Tailwind is doing under the scenes for that particular color value. So just some cool stuff there. The next thing I want to kind of talk through is just the styling. And Dom, you still with me there?
Still with you, just got nothing much to add, since it's
Okay,
not issue related, but design related, and my design skills are very much reliant upon you.
Yeah, just making sure. Yeah, and so the part here is the styling. So this is where, one of the more interesting parts of how Skeleton works, because we have this idea of, most of the stuff you're going to use is going to be like a component, and that component is going to have, if you've ever used Svelte or similar kind of framework, it's going to have, the component declaration. We're just using an example here. And then you're going to have different properties that you provide and the values that kind of go along with that. And the way we do this in Skeleton is that we allow you to provide what we kind of call style properties. So these are actual full like Tailwind utility classes that are provided through a property that then apply to a particular portion of that component. So what would that look like in maybe in practice here? I'm going to switch our theme back real quick. So maybe if you had something like an avatar, right? Like an avatar component, we would maybe import that component through this kind of format here, and then we would have maybe a background property. And with that, we could provide any of those kind of preset themes that, theme colors that we had, or, any of the default values that Tailwind provides, or any of the extended color values that you inject in your Tailwind config file. So you have lots of different options for colors here. So just a really kind of cool way to kind of get those styles applied to what is, essentially just a component, right? And we use these props in lots of different ways. And so it's not limited to just colors, like this is what we're using for the example, but you can do things like provide font sizes for different font. If you want the text a little bit bigger or smaller within a particular component, borders, you name it, we probably have a prop that kind of covers that. We don't replicate every single property that exists as far as the style. We just use those. We cover the ones that are probably the most common use case for that particular thing. Like if you're doing something that's text-based, you probably won't have a background on it, that kind of thing. So we wouldn't have a background prop, that kind of thing. But if you want to know what's available, we list all of that. So if we come here, you can click props and see kind of the full list of, hey, I can change the background, I can change the width, I can change the border, and that sort of thing. So we try to cover just about everything we can. But if there's some stuff, if there's a style that you haven't, or we don't have a property available for, we still allow you to change that through just the basic kind of class attribute. So just like you were putting it on a HTML element or something like that, you can just drop that on every single component in the library and just apply arbitrary styles to that particular component. And so the really cool thing with that is it just makes it like I almost treat it as like an overflow, right? So it's like if you've got these like nice presets, but if you're like, oh, I just really need this like other crazy thing, like you can drop that in there, and you can put as many of those as you want here. It's not limited to just one style. Now I will show you kind of a caveat with this. I worked up. Let me see if I've got it. Let's see. A little chart here. Yeah. Okay. Good. It's saved. Just to kind of explain this and visualize this a little bit, which is how do the properties kind of get applied. And so when you use the class attribute, so imagine this was instead of prop 1 or prop 2, this was your class attribute. the way those kind of utility classes get applied is we take that from the kind of component definition right here, right? And we drop that straight on the parent element for the component. So imagine this is the structure. We've got that. We maybe have a couple child elements inside of it. Imagine this was a list. So this is the list group. This is the list item 1, list item 2, that kind of thing. And so when we add a class, we always apply, from the class property, we always apply it right there straight to the parent, which means you are limited a little bit in that if you use the class syntax, you can't necessarily access this and you can't necessarily access this as you might expect. So you might be trying to change this background color and you might be trying to change this background color, and you just it's not working the way you want it to, and that might kind of confuse you to start with. And so that's why we provide these kind of presets, because we can kind of intelligently take those and apply that, like maybe that goes here, maybe that goes to the parent, or to here as well, or to down here to the child. And so just to kind of provide that easy sort of syntax to apply to whatever it needs to. You don't really have to necessarily think, if you're using those presets, of where it's going to go, because we kind of explain that to you. We say, okay, if you take that color and you put that, that property, it's going to affect, a particular portion of the component or whatever. So that's how we do that. Now, there are those scenarios where you kind of, you need both of those. You don't have a property for it. You need to use the class syntax, but you also need to apply it within kind of those child elements, right? So like from here down into here, right? And so for that, Tailwind actually offers a solution for that, which we show here, which is just this arbitrary syntax where it's like, it's a little funky with like brackets and an and sign and, the little pointy bracket, but it says basically target this child and apply this style here. So it's, it's a way to do that if you just really need to, but it's a little complex. It's a little hard to use. So we don't necessarily recommend folks do that. What I personally recommend is folks use this kind of next option, which is to set those values with a global override. And so you've probably done this. Maybe you import a library that has some UI, and then you go in your global style sheet and look for the class that it's being applied, or the ID that's being applied on that element, and then you go in your style sheet and you put some override styles that'll adjust that, right? So this is the same concept. We just build this into the components and elements themselves. So if you actually look, I'm going to switch this over here. Avatar. So this is the avatar component that I was just talking about. And so, ignore all what's going on up here. This doesn't really concern us. It's just the template itself. And so I just kind of want to show you kind of how some of that stuff is happening. So you can kind of see where like some of the base classes are being applied to the parent here. You can see we have some styles being applied to the image within the avatar component. And then, if you need to, do those global overrides, we provide what we kind of call selector classes. And so these are not classes that have any styles or any kind of functionality kind of tied to them. They're just literally there for you to create a selector to override that particular portion of the component. So if you just want to affect the image tag within the avatar component, you would take something like this. You would go into your global style sheet and say, give me this, and then maybe change, I don't know, maybe do an add apply background red 500. And that would apply that just to that selected element, but it would do it globally. So if you need to affect all of the instances of your avatar with a quick kind of global override, that you still have CSS, normal CSS ways to do that if you so choose. Okay, so all that makes sense. I'm checking chat, making sure everybody's still with me here. Dom, you still with me?
No complaints from chat there.
Okay. Sorry, it's kind of the strangest thing to be like sitting here and talking through this stuff, because with me and Dom here, I can sit here and converse with him, but with chat, man, I don't know how some of these folks do it. Oh, hey Ronald, it's good to see you. So yeah, we'll go ahead and continue on. So the next bit I want to show you is our design token system. So the design token stuff is really cool because it It's a very simple concept that sounds very complex when I start explaining it. Probably that's more on me than anything else. And so if you get a chance, what I would recommend is folks come in here. So it's in the docs and design tokens. We've got this really nice video from a guy named Brad Frost who talks through the concepts for this. And it's a little bit of a longer video, but you know, he does a really good job of explaining the reasoning for why you might use this and what they are and showing some demos and some examples and that kind of thing. But I was kind of thinking through this, you know, last night. I was like, there's an easier way to explain this, which is just to show it. So I think what we're going to do is to explain what this is, what the design token is we're going to build one real quick. We're going to build a token ourselves. And so, again, it sounds like it's a really complex and hard thing, but it's really very simple. And so I'm going to switch back to our demo here. Excuse me. We have this text here that's you know, changed to a different background color. So I'm going to switch over to our section here and go find that, which is here. And so we have this style that's applied, and that's really kind of cool. And Tailwind, you know, applies, you know, provides us some ways to modify that. So maybe on the dark mode, we would have something like primary, or let's go with background secondary 500. And so on light mode, we get this. On dark mode, we would get that. If we look, we're not really going to see that. I mean, we see the color change, but we're not going to be able to quickly toggle between those. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually import one of our components just to help kind of demonstrate this. There we go. And something is going on with my VS Code instance because it is not, my imports are not working. Emmet's not working.
Maybe just try a restart while it's off screen.
Yeah, something like that. So I'm so sorry, guys. Of course, we've got to have a couple technical details here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the import here. So import statements here. I've copied that, and then I'm just going to do this manually. And I'm just setting the language to TypeScript. There we go. Import that, and then we should be golden. So if I come back over to our demo, yeah, we've got the little toggle there. I'm going to do, here we go. Yeah. I'm going to put these in a little container so they're not just side by side and hard to see. So there we go. Okay, and then, I'm so sorry, this is taking a second. Okay, there we go. That looks a little nicer. So just putting a little space here. So what I'm going to do is I've imported this light switch component. And what this does is, you can see when I hover over it, it's going to say toggle light mode. I'm going to click that, and it's going to do the same thing our doc site does, which is lets you toggle between the two modes for that one particular theme. And what we're seeing there is we're seeing the result of what we put in here. So primary is our first color, dark is our dark variant of that. And there it is. It's doing exactly that. So this is cool, but hey, maybe you wanted to do something else. Like maybe you wanted to have like a text color, and so on and so forth. You've got all these different ways to do this. Or maybe you just want to do something like this, where it's like both are primary, but like this one's maybe a little darker and this one's a little lighter. So let's look at that. It's going to be a very subtle change between those, but you can do something like that. But when we're talking design tokens, what we're talking about is maybe like abstracting some of the stuff away. And so in order to kind of do some of this, we need to, you know, build a new class. And so I'm going to come into our app.postcss, and I'm going to just create my utility class. I'm going to call it utility class for a second here, just to explain why. And then I'm going to take these couple classes that I've done here, and I'm going to apply them here. Okay, and then I'm going to copy this, drop that in, and if all goes well, in fact, I'm going to make these look different, so we'll do orange. if I did that well, yeah, we've got orange and we've got pink, so it's switching back. And so our little like abstracted utility class that we created, it's there and it's working. Now that's a utility class. So like what is a design token? And so when you talk about a design token, that's kind of like going the next step, right? Like, so if we had something that was just like a combination, that might be something like that. But a design token, so if I do my design token, might kind of be a little bit closer to what we were talking about just a minute ago, where we have something like the color variation. So like maybe it's 200 here and 700 here, and this is primary. And it's a reusable class. That's really what we're kind of aiming for, right? And can drop this in, save that, and then here we get the dark pink and light pink, and there we go. Now you might say like this is not hard to create, right? And you know the other kind of thing to note here is also that we're ingesting values from our theme. So like when I mention the skeleton or theme skeleton, these kind of color values that we're setting in our theme, right? We're utilizing those, and we could do that a couple different ways. We could use the var format, or we could use the add apply or whatever. But the general idea is, a utility class could be anything. It could be any sort of combination of stuff. But a design token is very specifically geared towards consume the settings that I provided in my theme, put them in a nice clean package, and let me kind of reuse that over and over and over. And so this is, again, it's not hard to produce something like this. But imagine you have a bunch of different variations of this. You have lighter or darker combinations. You have the reverse. You've got, all different kinds of ways to kind of mix and match those. And so what we've done with Skeleton is we've actually just, let me put it here. Yep. You can see all these different categories. We've just done this for you. And so you can see we have background, whatever color you want, and then, some kind of variation of it. We've got pairings, which are color pairings. And so you're kind of seeing me do that already, right? Like I've got on my light theme, it's this color, and on my dark theme, it's this color. And that's the pairing, right? So you've got this idea of sort of each shade of color in your particular theme is paired with, what his partner will be on the light and dark theme. So for here, maybe we would have 400 and 400 and 500, 300 and 600, on and on and on. And so what this does, it seems very like, why would you do that? That's weird. I don't quite get it. That's what powers really for the light and dark mode to work within your entire skeleton system. So when you see us come and you toggle this value for this background on this header and over here and on this card, those are changing because it's flipping back and forth between its paired color. And the way we do that is we use this kind of systematic way to ensure that everything kind of balances out. And you end up with sort of like almost like a layered approach. So like your 50 and 900 is sort of your surface stuff, way back, it's really dark. And then you have a layer in front of it, and a layer in front of that, and a layer in front of that, and a layer in front of that. So you have all these different layers that you can do things to have kind of a separation. So like your background's dark, and then you have a card that's a little bit lighter, and then a header that's a little bit lighter. And that's your visual stack. That's the colors getting a little bit lighter, moving kind of this way. And then when you flip and go to your light theme, do this, then it goes the opposite direction. It starts with your background is this, and this is here, and this is here. And that's how that works. And so, again, we apply these not just for colors, but we can take the concept of design tokens and apply it to anything that's being consumed within inside of your theme. And so if we go look at our theme, we have colors. Yeah, go ahead, Dom.
Just to interrupt you very shortly there, it's very important to note that we only provide those color pairings as you can see in the chart. So there's just 50, 900, just 100, 800.
Yeah.
50, 800 won't work.
Yeah, and we do that for a very systematic reason. We also provide the opposite. So if you need like a contrasting color, like you're in a dark mode and you want it to be a light button, we provide the other way flipped around as well. So, but again, it's not just colors. It's also things like your fonts. So we go ahead and create these kind of utility classes that are very specifically consuming your theme settings. That's going to be for fonts. That's going to be for things like the rounded edges for your buttons or container elements like a card. how thick are your borders, and it even extends to stuff like accessibility. So if you come in here and you look and you see like we have this element that has this nice green, and then we switch over to, I don't know, maybe modern. Yeah, you can see how that text switches to a white. That's what we kind of consider that on color. So what we're doing is when we build or construct a theme, we're building it in such a way that we have these kind of, almost like an onion, right? These different layers for your colors, or these different kind of depths for each thing. And then we're also saving things like what is the most accessible color to put on top of your primary color or your secondary color or whatever. So if you have text or an icon like an SVG fill color, we're doing all that for you through this token system. So it's just really cool. It's really neat. And yeah, go ahead, Don.
Which was very cool and very sad at the same time, because we were working on the on-primary use this text color feature like a week ago, before Hunter Byte reviewed the first version of Skeleton he got his hands on.
I think it was, yeah, I think Hunter did it, and Joy of Code, I think was in chat earlier, did as well. And so we're like, oh, we're working on it, it's coming, that kind of thing. But I wanted to show you. Yeah, go ahead.
That was just so. We nearly got this. I'm so sorry.
yeah. So it's part of the process. We were making everything better. So, but I wanted to show you, like, again, like when I change themes, you're gonna see this kind of idea of the colors changing, and that's a really obvious theme thing, right? But you're also seeing things like how rounded this particular like kind of element is here compared to here, and compared to here, and compared to maybe like the gold. And that is coming straight from the theme settings. It's being consumed, again, by those kind of design tokens. So I've got a little chart for this to kind of visualize. You're creating your theme, which are CSS variables. We're creating these design tokens, which are these classes that consume the theme settings. And then we're actually putting those, you might be asking, what is the end use of these, right? Where you use that. We're actually making these the default settings for most elements and components and things like that. So that when you drop an avatar, or you drop something that has a button or something like that into your application, those are going to just immediately adapt to all of those settings that you've set, that you have provided in your theme. And then, of course, you build your pages with your different components, and it's just sort of snowballs all the way. So if you go back up in the tree, you go back up to your theme and you switch your theme like we're doing here, you're going to see that just update everywhere. So all of these different shades of colors are updating. If we're toggling back and forth between light and dark, it's doing that. The border radius is changing, all these different things. It's kind of cool to see it in practice, because it seems, at a glance, it seems so simple, right? Like, oh, just doing that. And then, of course, many of us have probably done this, where we build an application ourselves from scratch, and we go through and we put, I don't know, we have a button, and every time we put a button instance, we've got to set rounded, large, or rounded XL, or something like that. And then we have a million different instances of those classes all through our whole project. And then if we need to change that, we do the find and replace and hope it works. Or, use something like this, where it just abstracts that, and it's very specific to this is intended to, adhere to the theme and the theme settings itself. And so that's design tokens in a nutshell. It goes a little further than that, and again, I recommend Brad's talk to kind of go deeper in that. But if you're curious to, like, what do I have available for me as far as these, we have the documentation for all of these. And so you can see we've got kind of rounding tokens, we've got border tokens, we've got fill color tokens, just a ton of them in here. And they're all documented. They all kind of explain what they do. They reference the fact that they use, your theme colors, or that kind of color pairing system. So you kind of have the idea of like, what values can I plug in these little brackets here. But again, I also understand, like, we're using those as the defaults for your actual components that you're importing from Skeleton. But if you need to sit down and you need to build your own custom UI, this is a pain point that I've run into a lot. You build something with like material design, and then you try to build your own custom component that lives inside of that system, and you have a hard time replicating some of the styles and the theming and that kind of stuff. And that's what this helps with, is if you need to create a custom list or something like that, you have stuff that says buttons and that kind of thing. You don't have to worry, because if the element you're using is not a part of Skeleton and automatically adopts, you can still build your tool, your custom components that can still use these same tools that we use. So it's just, I don't know, it's really cool in practice. It seems it's very easy to adopt these two, because the format is very similar to just using Tailwind utility classes. We actually kind of use the same format, like BG for background. We just tack on the word token at the end. That's really the biggest difference, or kind of weird portion of that. But again, check this out. It's pretty cool. Excuse me. Now the other part for this, and this is kind of the last part of the essential, and then we'll take a little bit of a break here, is talking about our variants. And so the variant styles, I kind of demoed those very quickly earlier, but we have this kind of idea of, like, in Tailwind, we have things like buttons, and we have cards, and we have, chips and lists, and all these kind of CSS driven styled elements. So most of these are just using semantic stuff, like under the hood. This is using like an unordered list with a list item, that kind of thing. Buttons are just using either buttons or anchor tags under the hood, that kind of thing. But we're getting these kind of nice kind of default buttons that are, again, adhering to our kind of style. So for Rocket, these are going to be very like square, and for Skeleton, they're going to be very rounded and that kind of stuff. So we get the design token stuff working, but then there's kind of this extra layer that we add, which is just controlling sort of the visual display of it. So the UI, or the color, or however you want to kind of think of that. And so for that, that's where variants come in. And so we can quickly demonstrate this with the button section here, because I'm just going to make kind of a neutral background just so these are nice and visible on the stream. But you can see we have a whole bunch of different variants, and they're all kind of different categories. And so we have stuff like ghosts. So if I want to do ghost primary, it kind of gives us like this kind of faded background with a thick outline. I can do soft, and that's just basically the same thing but without the outline. We can do ringed, which is the opposite, and it has just the outline but no fill. And then we even have excuse me, a few other options there. And so if you look excuse me, my throat. If you look at our variant page, you can see just a quick demo of these. And so you can see excuse me, what the filled color looks like. You can see what the ghost stuff looks like, and you can preview this for each and every theme. So here's what it looks like for Modern, here's what it looks like for Rocket, here's what Crimson looks like, and you get all these, again, just turnkey, and they're very easy to add. So very similar to the design tokens, we're just using the utility class sort of syntax. Gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. Just can't get my throat clear. So if we wanted to copy this, we could do that. And look real quick here. And then if we look back here, we have our hello text. And so I can just drop this in on anything. It doesn't have to be a button. It doesn't have to be whatever. We can do that. See that we have that background. If I switch this to primary, or let's try something a little different. Ghost, secondary, there we go. And then we switch back. There we go. We see that's applied to just a simple paragraph element. Now, what if we went a little further? What if we did something like a button, right? So we had a button, and then we put in one of our kind of element styles, the button style, to make that style and look like a button with padding and that kind of thing. So we can kind of mix and match that. Let's make it a styled button with this particular background. If we come and look, we get exactly that, exactly what we're wanting. So if I leave it on here, I'm going to switch between a couple. So that's ghost. Let's say soft. Let's try primary soft. There we go. And then you can even do stuff like glass, which it's not going to really show very well here, maybe better in the docs, which is this kind of very like background blurry, but still kind of color tone sort of deal, which is really good for like putting on a busy background or an image, or like maybe you had a hero graphic or something like that, and the button was kind of getting lost in that. Might be a way to kind of make that look a little nicer. And so while it's really cool for buttons, like that's one example of it, but you can actually use these for a lot of the different features within Skeleton. So if you come to things like cards, you can apply all those same variant styles to your card. So now we have this like cool sort of semi-transparent card with an outline, or we can do a soft, kind of color, maybe something like secondary so it really stands out. And again, it's all adapting to the theme. So if you switch back and forth, we get that semi-transparent, looks really nice on that one. We see it in a different theme, maybe switch here and here. And so just nice presets for you to be able to add some variance while staying within sort of the confines of your design system that's established by the skeleton theme. So it's probably the best way I'm going to summarize that really is what I just said right there. So, okay, guys. So I think with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take just another quick little break. And then when we return, I'm going to open up chat to where we're going to do kind of like a live Q&A. So folks in the chat can, reach out to me and the mods and ask some questions, and then I'll do my best to answer those live and maybe even demonstrate some of the stuff you have. And just let us know kind of what you're thinking. You're welcome to go ahead and kind of put those into chat right now, and we'll see those in just a moment. And then again, when we return, we'll just kind of go through those, okay? So thank you guys for sticking around, and we will see you again in just a moment.
I think you might still be on mute. Yes, you're still on mute.
There we go. Gotta get all the unmutes, right? Sorry about that, guys. So I just said we're back, and we're just going to go through the Q&A section here. We'll start with the message that came up in chat. So, Dom, if you wanna start there.
Well, lots of the questions in chat has been already answered. How to customize the preset tokens we provide, which is just head to the theme generator, have a look there, use the theme generator to get a rough outline of the theme you want to generate. And then you can customize the values in the CSS that's shown below. And Chris will demo that on the next stream as well. So
yeah. The next part, we're going to do another stream here about 8 p.m. CST. So maybe check that for your time zone. And we're going to just try to pick up with where we're at. And so we'll probably dive right into that, or pretty quickly into. And we're going to show a few different things with the theming system. We're going to show how to just create a basic theme with the theme generator. We're going to show how to create one or start with one there, and then kind of tweak or customize those settings directly in the code. And then we're going to do another theme that's just, we're going to really tailor the experience and just maybe start with the theme generator, but like really kind of go to the extreme with tweaking the color values and maybe doing different fonts and just really kind of make it look unique and different. So should be really cool. So make sure if you can join that later stream, or check the recording later if it's too late in your time zone or something like that.
As it will be for most of Europe.
Yeah, sorry guys. So, okay, and then I'm going to so the other thing we did is we have prompted some folks to ask some questions ahead of time. So on our GitHub section, and this is good actually if you haven't seen it, if you go to GitHub discussions, look for the live AMA, you can add some questions. So maybe after the stream or something, if you're like, oh man, I wish I would have asked about this, or I wonder how that works, go add your questions there. Maybe one of the mods can drop the link for that in chat, and put it in there, and then we'll do another Q&A session for the next stream in a little bit, and be able to kind of jump back to that. But for now, we have some that people have already asked, and so I'll kind of let Dom kind of read that out, and then we'll talk through that.
So first question is from Result. Do you know of any good resources with tips or tools to help facilitate migrating a project or package, especially one built on SAS or less, to Tailwind? In my limited experience thus far, the process seems brutally arduous and time-consuming. Sorry to say, as far as I know, that's the only way.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware as well, just because they're a little bit of like apples and oranges, kind of thing. They're doing very different things. You have nesting, the kind of concept of nesting and stuff like that, and SAS or less, and that doesn't really exist in Tailwind. That's not a thing that Tailwind handles. And so, yeah, if at all possible, that's where I would kind of like stop and maybe kind of consider that as a next major iteration of my project. Start from scratch if you can, that kind of thing, and then kind of port the logic and the features and that kind of stuff back into it.
You could maybe try to handle as much of the post-processing that Less and SAS does in post-CSS, since it optionally supports nesting at least.
Yeah, maybe you could put them in parallel. Yeah. So that may be a way to do it. So, and if anybody in chat has kind of gone through that process and has any suggestions, please speak up. We'd love to hear that. Okay.
All right, next one. Will you one day add the dedicated input and form components by Paromati?
Yeah, so just so folks understand, if you've come from, I'm going to give another example, like a material design, or like I did a lot of work in previous years with Angular and the Angular material library, and so it's a component library, and they have turnkey components for things like input, text area, select, these kind of standard form, elements or things like that. We really kind of take a hard stance against doing that. We lean straight into let's use the native as much as possible, and that's not just in forms, that's for everything in general. So if there is a native form or element like a text element or a select element, we just try to style that to match the theme that you have as best we can. And the reason behind that is really important, which is, one, it's going to offer the best accessibility story for end users, which we talked about earlier is a major concern for us. You'll also notice if you use these elements between different operating systems, especially like from desktop to mobile, they tend to adapt to that interface much better. So if you do a select element on desktop, you get a little drop down. But if you do that on mobile, you actually get like a little scrolling, modal window that pops up, or maybe something from the bottom, and it's just very touch friendly and easy to use. And so, as much as possible, we try to lean into that just because the experience is the best. And also, they're much easier to use. So if you're needing to bind to that element, or you're needing to put a particular attribute, there's not this like middleman of having a component that you have to have all the props and everything has to be mapped through. Or if you're using Svelte, you use like a REST props and pulls all those kind of like miscellaneous props through for things like required or disabled or whatever those are. You don't have to deal with all that. It's not a headache. You just get direct access to the element that you're trying to use, and it's just, I find it personally a much better experience as a developer, and I think as a user, it's much nicer as well for accessibility and things like that.
What I'd like to add from a developer perspective is that at least I have struggled enormously to style elements like that.
Yeah.
So having one single material UI component behave differently than all the others on the page,
Yeah.
that was a fight.
Yeah.
Having it just applicable as a CSS class means I can change whatever I want.
Yeah. And this comes from seeing this in practice, feeling the pain points, and trying to do better. So, we a lot of what Skeleton implements and the way it implements is from learned experience from other libraries, other tools, things like that, things that we've experienced, and those pain points that come from that. So, yeah.
All right, no further chat questions, so we can continue with the questions from Stu on Discord.
Yeah, and so Stu is actually one of our sponsors. He reached out on Discord, and actually he went all out. He asked like 6 different questions with like sub questions and just all kinds of stuff. So we wanted to make sure to address that because he brought up some really cool and interesting stuff. So we'll go ahead and start with those.
All right, first one. UI libraries normally cover some common use cases like marketing, application UI, e-commerce, which is a mixture of self-contained components and example pages. Will we be taking a similar approach?
Yeah, and so the funny part with this is we don't quite have the name of the semantics of what this is within a component library. Like even if you go to like a Flowbyte or a Mantine or something like that, everybody kind of calls these different things. But I really like Flowbyte's term for it, which is blocks. And I like to think of it as like you have your primitives like a card and a button and an avatar and these different little bits and pieces. And you kind of put those together in different combinations. And you have these like chunks of styles or components or whatever. And that's your block, right? That's the sort of thing. And so you might have a block that's, arranged for an e-commerce page, like a checkout page, or a marketing page, like a nice hero or something, like when you kind of land on the page. And so, yes, absolutely. We're wanting to expand to those. We'll be talking through Skeleton Labs, actually, here in a little bit. And as part of that, we'll be kind of talking through some of the expansions that are related to this. So just, again, kind of stay tuned for that, and we'll talk through some of that. Okay?
Right, which leads us pretty much to the next question, building things with Skeleton. Building a UI library with Skeleton is a no-brainer, as there is a ton of big wins you get out of that, because it's built using Skeleton like built-in themes, day-night mode, native Svelte support, etc. Is there anything you can think of that's possible with this UI library that other libraries haven't done yet? For example, Flowbyte recently released an admin dashboard that's currently React-only.
Yeah, and so similar to the blocks idea, this idea of like templates or like full site designs, be that a dashboard or a blog or a homepage or a landing site, we're going to be introducing those as well. These will probably be like Tailwind and Flowbyte and these others do, a premium feature. You come on, you pay some amount, and you get access to those. But they're going to be very high quality and very nice. They're going to be built with Skeleton, which means all of this sort of adaptive theming and things that we talked about, the design tokens, all of that, they'll be built using that. And the other kind of cool thing when we talk about like, okay, there's that, and then there's also the the open source library. It's like, I mean, maybe I'm not necessarily going to pay or buy some of that stuff. We're still going to be building new stuff for those templates, and so the idea is to contribute that back, and those are new primitives that you have inside of Skeleton itself. So there's going to be like a really cool synergy between these, and so he asked specifically like what is unique as far as our offering for these. And when we're talking theme specifically, this idea of like when you go and buy a theme from Theme Forest or any of these companies out there, it's very static as far as what it looks like. And so you may have like 50 different buttons on different pages, and they're all maybe like hard coded to a particular color or that kind of thing, right? Whereas with Skeleton, we've kind of seen that where you can kind of just switch out the theme, whether it's a theme you've created or one of our presets. And this theme is no longer this static thing. It adapts and changes, and the visuals look, very different, so that your copy of that template that you've got is not the same as the next guy's version of that template. So I'm very excited to see this in practice because, it's I think kind of unique and kind of different. Theming is not new. There are themes that you can buy out there that have different themes that you can change out, but the simplicity that we of which you can do that with Skeleton is really kind of the unique feature there for sure.
One of the features that pulled me to the library as well.
Yeah, and the fact that I kind of mentioned like if you need to extend, you have all the same tools available to you that we used, so you can you need a new page, you need a new component. It's easy to just kind of make it look like it's part of that page and that system. So, yeah, it's going to be cool. I think I'm super excited to see some of that stuff come around.
Same here. So, next question is a bigger one with sub-questions, as you teased already.
Yeah.
With Skeleton hitting 1.0, obviously the team deserves some time to rest after the hard graft getting there. Big thanks to everyone that helped test it as well. There's been more use the past few years about the difficulties developing open source software.
Sure, yeah.
And the first question is, what's the biggest issue we face trying to develop this in the open?
Yeah, so for me personally, like this is my first open source project. And so there's been a huge learning curve as far as like how to build that, how to, structure the technical side, how to manage community, how to keep everybody motivated, how to keep people contributing and using, establishing these guidelines so that somebody's not just going rogue and building something that we can't use. So that's, but I think that's pretty common to most open source projects. And again, we're kind of learning as we go, which is the challenge there. But that said, we've been doing this for a little bit now, and I think we've really settled into a good system for that. Like I'm very excited about our core team and the work that they're doing and the contributions that we're getting from the community are the quality is top notch and super good. And like I kind of skimmed over this earlier, the documentation that we just rolled out, there's huge improvements to the quality of the information in that, but that came from the community. There was like nearly, was it like 5 to 10 people that came in and just, Dom included, came in and just, kick butt. Everybody segmented and took different sections and improved that. And so what you're seeing there is really the culmination of a lot of hard work from a lot of folks. And so, when I say that we have a system that's working, there's a really good example of that right there,
Doc rework was actually very fun to do.
Yeah. It takes a certain type. So.
Hey, I finally had a reason to try out AI because I just wasn't happy with how the sentence was flowing, and ChatGPT at least pushed it in the right direction.
Yeah,
it wasn't perfect, but
it
was a start.
We won't even need copywriters in the future. We'll just use ChatGPT.
I think that's going to take another 5 to 10 years.
There's no problems with that at all, I'm sure.
All right. Next sub-question for 1.0 and how to contribute to Skeleton a bit.
Oh, okay.
For those
so
that don't have time.
Yeah, that's a good segue. So we do have a contribution guide that we've put together. It's linked both on the GitHub. So if you go to the GitHub in the sidebar, there's like contributing. It should take you there. Or if you just go to the documentation site, I think I can show this real quick. You come to the documentation site and under docs, contributing, and then we have like 3 different if you've never contributed, we'll kind of talk you through that. And then we have 3 different sections of like, how do we expect you to contribute, or how do you format your pull requests, that kind of thing. How do you style your code, and then how do you document the feature or whatever that you're doing. So all of that is right there and easy to access. And of course, we're on GitHub, we're on Discord pretty much constantly. We have people all around the world that's on a different time zone. So if you have a question, don't be afraid to come on and ask. We have a contributing channel on Discord. Speak up, let us know what you're trying to do. And that is something, and I will put that kind of out there. We do ask folks to try to sync with us before you build the feature, just for one, to make sure somebody else isn't already doing it, that has happened. That scenario has played out. And then also to just make sure you understand kind of what our guidelines are, what we will accept, because we won't just take anything. Like if you just kind of randomly send stuff rogue to us, we'll look at it. But in a lot of cases, if a pull request is going to be denied, that's probably why they send something and it doesn't jive with what our expectations are. Because keep in mind what the end goal here is. We're bringing in these features and we're serving these to a huge number of folks, and so we have to make sure that it reaches that level of quality that we really need for us to be able to accept that.
Just to expand on that, if you don't have the time to contribute a feature or a bug fix, at least send in the bug report for what you noticed.
Yeah.
If you see a mistake in the docs, just at least drop us a note. Use the app, use Skeleton, talk about Skeleton to your friends and co-developers.
Yeah.
Just spread the word a bit, or if you got 5 minutes, jump into the support channel and maybe someone needs help.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways you can contribute, and most of it, we're doing pretty good as far as like keeping busy and what we need to do and getting stuff. So our it's not a lack of how fast we can move because we don't have enough hands. In a lot of cases, it's just making sure that we're satisfying the needs of the folks that are using it, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. So.
Got also a couple of new questions in chat, actually.
Okay, great.
First one being probably about the yet-to-be-named premium offering and templating from Skeleton. Mm-hmm. What about a template like the full Docs app? You've put so much work into that.
That thought has crossed my mind. I've seen people on Twitter, just not even related to Skeleton, just saying, man, I wish I had a good documentation solution. Obviously, Svelte and SvelteKit are just kind of really kicking off. And so there's some new tools being built for the ecosystem. So being able to provide a nice documentation solution for those folks is something that's high up on my priority list. I don't know that we can just take our documentation and serve that, just because it has a nice veneer, but we need some work behind the scenes. Any developer understands this. It's not a surprise. But I do think that it is something that we could build towards. We could start taking bits and pieces and start building this kind of nice standalone tool that could be then used for that. And maybe that's something we would start by kind of dogfooding and building our documentation on it. I don't know. We'll see. But it's definitely in the cards. It's something I would really like to handle.
Next question from Stephen. If you're drawing diagrams with D3 or SVG, mm-hmm. What do you think about using skeleton theme colors with those diagrams versus a diagram-defined palette?
Yeah, so when it comes to SVG, you can use classes. So you can use fill colors and things like that. So it's very kind of plug and play with the way Tailwind operates, and our, of course, Skeleton in that regard. When you start getting to stuff that's built with like canvas elements and things like that, where it's built with, there's some WebGL or something involved, then the colors really can't be passed as CSS. They need to be in like a JavaScript format. And so we're putting some thought into that as far as like, how can we handle that? So when we create a theme in our theme generator, for example, right now we just output a CSS file. But what I would really like to be able to do is output a CSS file and then also a matching JavaScript file that has those same colors in that format, so that you don't have to go in and manually, what is this hex value, create a variable to, back and forth. We just handle that for you. And so regardless of the sort of source that you're drawing from and constructing that UI element, you have those values available to you. So I will say, like, we've been down this path a little bit. I'm going to switch back to the docs real quick, show this quick example here. So we have some visualization components that just to maybe get you started, like the conic gradient. So the way this is constructed is it's not using SVG like some of the features we're using. It's just a CSS conic gradient. So it's a cone. So you kind of start almost like a clock. So you say from here to here, do this swatch this color, and then here to here, and it goes all the way around the circle. And so that's pure CSS. And so you can kind of see some examples and even come and look at the source for how we generated this. Just maybe get an example of how you might build something similar. So, but we have that. And then we also, you mentioned specifically SVG. We have our progress bar progress radial, which is actually drawn on the screen with SVG. So this is using SVG strokes and things like that. And then we're just dynamically changing the length of that values based on the current value of the whatever you're trying to represent. But you can see we're changing colors and things like that, and that's handled through properties for stroke, stroke here and stroke here. So I've got a couple examples that you can draw from, and again, the source code's linked on any of these. You can come here and take a peek behind the scenes on how we're constructing that, and maybe again use that to inform the way you're building those.
The next chat question I can probably partially handle. I like the theme generator random color feature, but how about locking colors after randomizing? Like if you like surface, primary, and success, but only the others should regenerate.
Yeah.
Great feature request. We've been thinking about how to improve the theme generator a bit in the background as well. Like I personally want to add a save and load function.
Yeah, that's been a highly requested feature, and I know we've talked about it. I don't want it to be the elephant in the room real quick, so I'll just show real quick what that is. So if you come to the theme generator here, create a theme, you can come in here and toggle the preview on and just hit randomize. And it's a little bit like disco mode, right? Like you can just get all these different color variations and all the hex values are just kind of randomly picked. And so sometimes you get something that looks really good like that, and sometimes you get something that looks like this that's like 90s neon. I don't know. It's kind of crazy looking. But what the question was, being able to pin those and only randomize particular slots there. Yeah, I think that's something that's in the cards. We do have some like ideas in mind for just really expanding the theme generator and making that more friendly, easier to use, more features. Like we recently added like the contrast checker that checks some accessibility for certain, like if you have text on top of like your primary color, is that accessible, is that readable, and it kind of grades you. It gives you like a color grade system and like a thumbs up icon kind of thing. And of course, when we talk themes, it's not just colors. That's typically what we go to first, but we have this idea of I'll switch back over, this idea of like changing fonts and changing the rounding of sizes and stuff like that. And I think we could go a lot further with that. Maybe things like margins and paddings and stuff like that. So you could have stuff that's very like compact, or you could have stuff that's very like, lots of little white space and things like that. So there's a lot of room for expansion with this. There's really two people involved that are helping do some of this. Reese, who was going to be as part of the talk tonight, but unfortunately won't be able to make it. And then we had a new contributor, and I'm so sorry if you're seeing this, I forgot your name, but very intelligent guy, very, smart guy that knows colors, through and through. Like he's coming from, I believe like a background in like,
it was game development, I think.
Well, who was it?
It was game development, I think.
Yeah. And so like drawing graphics and, games and stuff like that. And so he knows like the color spaces and conversion and all these kind of funky things that like, oh, we want to do some of that. We can do some really cool stuff, And so there's the complex stuff that's kind of maybe going behind the scenes like that. And then there's just, again, the UX and UI side of it, of like I personally get a little annoyed that I can't just change each slot color, individually. Like we have like 500 and 600. I want to just change 900 here. I can't do that right now. But, we're doing our best to kind of, make a nice even palette for you. And so right now it's mostly automated. And I think for a lot of folks, that's a good way to approach this, just to make it as easy and accessible as possible. So, yeah.
Right, that's it with chat questions. So we can go back to Stu's
okay.
question from Discord.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Next up was number 4 of 6, although 5 is missing. What do you envision are the big things for 2.0 that didn't make the cut for 1.0?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person that's just always brainstorming new ideas. So whether that's expansions to features we already have, or new things, or rethinking the way we've implemented things already. And so like there's some stuff that's like really out there. Like one of the ideas that has come to mind is this idea of like right now we have elements, which are like your HTML and CSS style, like a button or a card or whatever, right? And then you have these components that are these more complex, and they have state and that kind of thing. And see, we've seen this kind of rise lately from libraries coming out that are headless, which just means they don't have any styles built in. You just get the functionality, and then you add your own styles on top of that. So you really, from the ground up, design what that looks like. And I think there's benefit to that. But I think with Skeleton specifically, we can kind of maybe can go like a step further than that, which is providing these components that are headless, but then having these elements that kind of pair with it. So an idea for that would be, I have an HTML table that I've put on, and maybe I have a data table, component or a feature that has these really complex features, but it's headless by default. So if I want, I can just use it in isolation as a svelte component and style it the way I want. Or you can just quickly like flip a switch or put in a class or however that works, and it would draw from and use Skeleton's built-in theme system and aesthetics and all of that. So it's this idea of like you could build it yourself, but you can also use what we provided, or maybe there's even some kind of like weird like middle ground with that. So that's one of the things I would like to tackle, because we've tested the waters a little bit with that. And if it's one of those things I've kicked myself of like, man, I wish I would have thought of this, a year ago, but hindsight and all that. But yeah, that's definitely one of them. More of everything. We want more elements. We want more components. We want just go further and further so that we can satisfy. We want Skeleton to kind of be the like one-stop shop for everything you need when it comes to primitive UI or even some of these like more complex features like modals and that kind of stuff. So if we can prevent you from having to install a third-party dependency, like cool, we'll try to build that into the core. But and kind of on a related note to that, like this idea of like you have this core library that has all these bits and pieces. Like we might at some point it might be too much for folks to like, I only want to use this piece, or I only want to use this piece. And so this idea of breaking it up and making it more modular is also kind of on the table there. And so maybe I don't know if we would necessarily go as extreme as something like Radix from like the React world, where it's like every component you install is a separate package. Like that's a little extreme for me. But like some of the stuff we have in our utilities, I think those would be beneficial. Like we could spin off the modal system, and you don't even have to use Skeleton. You just bring in Skeleton modal, and you can use that in your vanilla Skeleton, or Svelte project. So
we also talked about maybe if we ever manage to bring back data tables, which are still on the table as far as I know.
Yeah, they're a tough one. I mean, we've spent like a year with our prototype just trying to get that thing working, and it works, but there's so many edge cases and bugs and that kind of thing. But I mean, you look at the ecosystem, and there's literally like entire libraries dedicated to just building data tables really well. And like we probably won't ever be able to compete with that. And so it's the saying, if you can't beat them, join them. We're looking at solutions that other folks are doing that are headless by default, and then being able to just bring those in, drop in the skeleton styles, onto those kind of, table elements or whatever, but you still get all of that logic and features. And it's one more dependency, which I hate, making people add something else. But sometimes it's just better to have a good tool that's purpose built for one thing, and that's a good use case for something like that.
Right. Then basically only one question left.
Okay.
And that's a great tie-in for the next part of the stream. It's about Skeleton Labs and the funding for Skeleton.
Yeah, which it's always an interesting thing if I've used open source, projects and libraries and stuff like that for years. And it's not something you necessarily always think about. It may not be on the forefront of your mind of like, how are these guys keeping the lights on? How do they keep going? And so one of the challenges for me, as a core maintainer and the project is how do we keep Skeleton going? We want it to exist in a year and, 5 years out and that kind of thing. How do we accomplish that? And so what we're doing is just kind of following the lead of some of the other groups that have come before us. And we've formed this company called Skeleton Labs. And so while Skeleton, the library is open source, it's MIT license, and you can kind of do whatever you want with it, we still need this kind of entity that lives alongside that, which is Skeleton Labs, to control things like, hey, if we want to be able to do sponsorship so people can send us money or contribution, we need to have a bank account. We need to have a business to be able to do that. So it's just a very a logical thing to have that and have that in place. And again, that's the kind of stuff like I'm going to be bringing here just in a moment. We'll switch. We'll send Dom off and we'll bring in Trey, who is I haven't mentioned him much on the stream yet, but he is very critical to the fact that Skeleton even exists. In that when I created Skeleton, I was working for Trey at this company called Brain and Bones. And so what we've done is, we realized we had this really kind of cool tool internally that we were using. We felt like it had, it was kind of growing beyond us and we needed to kind of spin it off into its own thing. And so the open source project for Skeleton came straight from being a Brain and Bones project to an open source project. And so that came from Trey, just saying, yes, you can do that, which I'm sure if many of you work for a company or, startup or whatever, you don't always get that opportunity, right? So it's been very cool to be able to do that. He supported, early days to kind of get that out the door. He's been a super valuable help for just, how do we get the business set up? How do we do, this and that? And so again, here in a moment, I'm going to bring him on and we're going to go a little bit further into just the Skeleton Labs stuff, Skeleton Labs. And then I also want to talk, and we'll cover several things. We'll talk about, what our goals are, what have we done with Skeleton Labs already for supporting, and then also what are we building towards? So that's some of the templates and things like that we were talking about earlier. So again, if Dom, if you will go ahead and just sign out here in a second, we'll drop off, and I think what I'll do is I'll go to the BRB screen and I'll let Dom take off, and then when we come back, Trey will hopefully be here. I haven't talked to him, so I need to make sure he's online and everything. But if he is, I'll come back, and otherwise you'll see me in just a moment, and we'll kind of talk through some of that stuff. So
before you do that and you kick me out, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I almost failed to mention that. Yes, thank you, Dom, for joining us and talking through and helping co-host through this, and of course to everybody that's contributed. Nick and Adrian and everybody else I see the names popping up in chat. Thank you guys. You guys have supported me through so much of this, so I appreciate it. Especially just getting this whole event organized. So really, thank you. Appreciate it.
No, thank you first and foremost for open sourcing this and for all the work and time you put in. Thank you very, very much. Yeah,
you're welcome. Of course, it's work, but it's also something I enjoy. So I'm glad I've had a chance to meet so many awesome people and help folks out. So all that sort of thing. But okay, anyways, we'll be right back, and we'll check in just a second. Okay, guys.
Bye, guys.
Good. There we go. I'm unmuted now. Almost got me again. So we're back. I'm of course joined with Trey Weir, who is I was kind of talking up a moment ago. It's been a sort of mentor figure to me, and things like that from Brain and Bones, and very critical for helping us get started. So I'll shush up and let him kind of introduce himself real quick.
Hey guys, my name's Trey Weir, and first and foremost, I want to thank Chris and everybody that has come together to put this stream on. I think it's been extremely beneficial. I think it's a crescendo to all the work that we've been doing over the last year plus, because of where Skeleton really got its roots in Brain and Bones. But so Dom, Nick, all you guys, man, y'all are awesome. You know how much I love you guys, and being the business guy of the group, I don't contribute too much in terms of code being written, but I do enjoy our fun conversations that we have on where this is going to go and how we're going to use this, and our dedication to the people that are going to use it, and our intense need to put something out there that's got great quality. And I think that's what's been driving us. And we couldn't do it without the folks on Discord, the folks on GitHub, and everybody that's contributed. So thank you for that. As I just mentioned, I'm the business guy of the group, and my background is in mergers and acquisitions, but I got started back when telecom got deregulated in '96. So I've been around. I predate the original www. So I've seen them come. I've seen them go. I've really enjoyed watching how things get better, but then at the same time, I watch how things repeat. People seem to make the same mistakes, and then there are those that do the same things right. And so it's been fun to watch that. As Chris probably already mentioned, that I started Brain and Bones, and we're a tech group mainly in the gaming side of the world, and that's how I got connected with you. What was that? Almost 3 years ago?
Yeah,
almost,
yeah,
right?
it's been a few years now. Yeah. So we're both kind of met in the startup world for sure.
Yeah. So it's funny because you and I have this conversation on more than one occasion that, we kind of scratch our heads and say, how in the world did we get here?
Yeah.
I mean,
This honestly, this whole last year has just been a flash. Like it feels like, it's been 2 or 3 months, and then no, it's been a year plus. So it's crazy, which I think is a good sign. It means I'm having fun, right?
Yeah. Well, that is a good sign. Yeah. Well, and I love that. I love that the roots. One of my favorite sayings is that necessity is the mother of all invention, and I love the fact that I love the story of Skeleton in that you and Thomas y'all set out to solve a problem that we were having in the Brain and Bones world, and initially you guys set out to solve just that problem, and then lo and behold, you with y'all's creativity and y'all's insight saw the need and the opportunity to take Skeleton, to turn that solution into Skeleton, which has been so much fun to watch. And I've not done hardly any work at all in open source, and so this has been fun for me. I mean, yes, I am a pure capitalist kind of guy.
That's what I was saying earlier. I was like, a lot of this is new territory for me too. Like I've used the things that have come from this kind of system, but it's a whole other ball game to be on this other, the other end of things. So it's been really cool. But I'm glad you also mentioned Thomas as well. So I haven't had an opportunity to bring him up. So you may have, if you go and look at like the contribution list on Skeleton stuff like that, you might see his name on there. So Thomas worked alongside me at Brain and Bones for, when we were kind of getting this started. And so Skeleton, funny enough, came from, he was kind of working as like a QA engineer, junior developer, that kind of thing. Came from me teaching him the different sort of frameworks that exist out there. So we went through and did a React course, and we did a Vue course, and we did Angular, and we went through, all these different ones. And at some point we went to Svelte because I wanted to see, show him the difference between all of these. And so when we got done using Svelte, we both kind of looked to each other and we're like, I want to keep using this. And he was like, yeah, I do too. And so that's that's really kind of what turned that, that knob for us of like, how do we start moving what we're building, which is, Angular for a lot of stuff we were building at that time. How do we start moving that over to Svelte and eventually SvelteKit and that kind of thing? And so that was, again, kind of the birthplace of, seeded the idea in our minds of what if we build a component library around all of this. And so that, thank you for bringing him up, because I'd mentioned, I've been wanting to give him a shout out with that. And of course, Thomas is still, busy and doing other things, but he may actually be in chat. And he may be, checking in with us and that kind of stuff. So he's still around and still helping out here and there kind of thing. So.
Yeah. Well, like we've talked about, you blink and all of a sudden it's 12 months later, but you guys have done, I mean, like I said, you guys have done an amazing job to get us here. And so now what do we do with it? Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of always the question with, open source and in general is like, how do you make money with open source to, and it's not necessarily like a profit thing. Like I'm not trying to be, Mr. Moneybags swimming in, whatever. It's how do I keep the project going? How do I keep people involved? How do we maybe, some of these folks that are doing really good work, how do we start, paying those as like, employees, or like what do we do with this? Right. And so that was the kind of one of the first questions or the earliest questions we had. And so, very early in the process of going open source, we made this decision of we need to get this business in place. And thankfully, the state of Texas made this a very easy process for us. Right, Trey? Yeah, it's a process.
I don't remember it being that easy.
Yeah. It's a process that normally takes a few days, but I think between elections and COVID and all these things, it took months. I don't even remember how long it was. So,
well, the first thing was whenever we were, whenever we decided to do Skeleton Labs, and we were just trying to get our corporate charter done. I've literally never had an LLC come back from the state of Texas in greater than 7 days. Yeah. And it took almost a month, and we weren't the only ones. I mean, my lawyer buddy who was doing all that work for us, he was just like, I don't know what's going on down there. They're just they can't get anything out. So
it was just a bit of a mess. But we persevered, and we've made it done. And so we ended up announcing, I think it was November when we announced Skeleton Labs.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so as part of that, we kind of put out we've got a website. Let me pull that up real quick just in case anybody wants to check that out. Skeleton Lab. Here we go. So we have the skeletonlabs.co as the company site. We talked through a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about here today, but general ideas, we're just trying to explain where we fit as far as, what does that mean to live alongside the open source project? How does that support that? And so some of the services that we have already been providing and we're trying to provide in the future, I think this is kind of a good segue into just kind of talking through some of those. So,
sure. Yeah, I think the purpose of Skeleton Labs is to provide an anchor to open source. And what I mean by that, I don't mean anchor as controlling or anchor as, getting into the whole capitalistic, we're trying to flip this and whatever, just like Chris said, that this is not something that we're going to turn into, a publicly traded company. That's not our object here, but nothing costs. There's nothing of value that doesn't cost something. So whether it's network, whether it's legal, whether it's accounting, whether it's, there's a million things that are out there that add up to keeping a non-for-profit, if you will, entity up and running. I mean, that's just the nature of what's going on. And so and Chris alluded to this earlier, that in the state of Texas and the United States, in order to have a bank account, you have to have a legit entity, unless you're going to do it as an individual. And nobody wanted to do that in order to avoid, to avoid the liability of an individual. So we had to create an LLC. So I think one of the things that we're doing here is, in addition to being able to be the caretaker, if you will, of Skeleton as an open source project, We also give the opportunity to incentivize people to add to what we're building. Whether it's the ability to make money on providing services. In fact, didn't we just see a couple of weeks ago? We saw a job posting where somebody was wanting a website built, and they specifically mentioned that the applicants needed to know skeleton.
They put skeleton on the job requirements, and it was just kind of mind blowing to me, because it's like we're just in this race to kind of get the V1 and get the first iteration of the project out, but like people are already trying to hire for it and do that kind of thing, and so that's that's the kind of stuff where it's like we're really kind of keen to find different ways that we can support the open source project. And so I wanted to talk real quick, just a couple of examples of like what have we done already. And so you may have gone to the GitHub and seen Skeleton Labs as the parent organization or something. Like what is happening, what's going on behind the scenes there. And so there's really two things that we've done so far. The first one being that by being a company and having access to a bank account and this kind of thing, we've been able to offer sponsorships, so people can come on GitHub or Ko-Fi or Patreon and eventually other services that we had, and donate to the project. And that doesn't go to me, that doesn't go to Trey, that goes to the project. We put that in into savings, and that goes into what's going to essentially be our funding for advertising. So now that we're launched and V1 is here, like we need to let people know it exists, right? We need to put it out there. So we're going to be doing some of that stuff. You may notice on the new version of the documentation, we also have a very tiny, small ad position up there in the corner. It's very like non-intrusive. I am not an ads guy. I don't like ads, that kind of thing. So these at least satisfy my doesn't make me angry thing of they pass that check. But again, that's just another way to kind of bring those funds in and help cover some of this. And so the things we're kind of going to put that towards is going to be, again, I mentioned maybe paid advertising. We would really love to have something like I know we have some wonderful YouTubers and content creators and things like that around us, to maybe generate like some tutorials and stuff like that, like a course, just to help kind of for people that are more visual, to be able to have a way to learn what Skeleton is and how it operates. And so in order to do that, we've got to find folks and be able to fund those folks to do that work, because it's hard work to do some of that. The little bit of video production I've done has been it's quite a bit of effort.
And good. Well, I was just going to say, I see there in the chat that we've already Ronald asked about consulting services, and that's a great question, Ronald. We appreciate you reaching out to us. Our biggest problem with consulting and running Skeleton is that we don't have enough Chris's. Chris can't double himself or triple himself. We would love to be able to help people out in that particular type of situation. But I think our goal is to create this tool so that we can facilitate others to be able to do consulting services. Yeah. Because it's a manpower issue, and ultimately, it's trying to get the best product out there. And I don't think I truly didn't understand it until we got in the middle of it, how much work it takes to get to where we got to today. And I think it's a testament to the folks that jumped in and helped us out. I think it's a testament to how much work you did, Nick did, Dom, Thomas did a ton of work too. Yeah. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough daylight, enough hours in the day to get that kind of stuff done. Yeah. And so I think what we would like to do is figure out a way to make all boats rise with the tide, and so get as many people as we can that are familiar with this, and have Skeleton be that good a tool that you would be able to very soon go out and find somebody familiar with Skeleton, and then be able to go and do stuff with them. So that's a great question, Ronald. Appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. I think another, I think you might be going into this next, talking about templates, talking about premium products.
And I've alluded that a couple times in the stream and things like that. And the reason I bring that up so much is because it's something that a lot of people ask us about. Like, even this week, within the last couple of days, we've had questions or people asking about, hey, are you going to be building these kind of more complex components? Are you going to be building templates? Are you going to be building tooling, additional tooling around the library? Like, are you going to be doing any of these things? And the answer to that is yes, of course. But as Troy mentioned, like, I'm just a single person, so I can only do so much at a time. So the focus has just really been, let's get V1 out the door, and then now that it's there, we have this really stable foundation to then build off of. Because we don't want to be selling, templates and things built on the beta software, right? Like it wouldn't feel right. So now that we've kind of hit that comfort point with stability and things like that, we feel confident to start building some of these things that people have been asking for. And so I'm super excited about these because, we talked a little bit about this in the Q&A section, but I think our templates are going to be very unique compared to many out there in the kind of ecosystem in that they're just so flexible. Like, you can just do so much with them. Because the thing that always kills me from, like, I've been doing this stuff for, nearly 20 years or so, right? Is I hate to go and get a template and it looks just like somebody else bought because all they did is just slap a logo on there and call it a day, right? Like, that doesn't feel like it's my site. It doesn't feel like it's my theme or my branding or whatever, for the company or whatever I'm representing there. And so being able to offer a solution that, takes all these really cool tools that we've kind of talked about today, and we'll be showing off a little bit more with the theme system later tonight. It's going to be so cool. Like, I know I keep saying that over and over and over, but here I see it already, but I can't wait for other folks to see it as well, because, I think it's going to, the whole purpose of why we started Skeleton was we wanted to make things faster and more productive for us. And then we've open source Skeleton so that it can make it more productive and helpful for other folks. And then by offering these kind of things like that, it really takes you to that next level of, I don't have to start from scratch. I can start from a nice foundation and build up, but still customize, tweak, introduce new elements and all of that. Whereas it can be a pretty, difficult process to do that with something you may find on another theme, site or something like that, a website or something like that. So again, I'm very excited to see that kind of come to fruition. We've had lots of requests for these more complex features, doing deeper dives into things like just purely e-commerce and just purely like a SaaS landing site or what have you, these different sort of flavors of web applications, a dashboard or something like that. And so the other thing that this is going to do is I kind of mentioned earlier, this kind of synergy between us building these kind of premium projects is that, how do we kind of continue working on the open source side of things as well? And so if we build a new, let's call it a dashboard website, right, that we're gonna put out there, those primitives that we're building, like some data visualizations, like a chart or something like that, maybe new navigation tools or whatever, like we can take those and package those up as the primitives that are then part of the core open source library. So this kind of cross-pollination between the two is going to be really cool, because we'll be able to do it in sort of like I said, kind of flavored sections. Like, we might have a bunch of expansion to e-commerce type UI because we're focusing on building an e-commerce template for this side of things. And then if you're not the type that's creative and can put that stuff together in a really meaningful way, then you will have these templates that you can use again as a starting point to kind of get started, and you'll have full access to all the source code and just really be able to kind of do whatever you want. And we're gonna and I haven't really mentioned this prior, is we're gonna keep these maintained. So even if we put major versions out for Tailwind, those templates and things like that, or excuse me, for Skeleton, I said Tailwind, for our stuff will continue to be maintained, which is kind of following a model we see with stuff like Tailwind UI. Tailwind UI is doing a really good job with this. They started with these components or blocks or whatever you want to call them, and then they've moved recently into templates. And so we're very inspired by that sort of approach, because it's very accessible. It's very cost efficient. Things like that. Like, what you get out of that is very nice. and potentially even like it will grow over time as we continue to add more and more to this. So very, very excited to, again, kind of get that stuff out there and in front of folks. And again, as part of this like V1 launch, this is sort of the kickoff point for me to, start working towards that. And so hopefully,
Sure.
I don't want to I don't have an ETA for when that might drop, but I'm hoping maybe we can start teasing some stuff, here in the near future. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, we've had this conversation on several occasions about people get themselves in trouble when they try to create the silver bullet, when they try to be everything to all people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that intrigues me the most about SvelteKit, about Tailwind, and about what we're doing is that, obviously if you are as talented as Nick or Dom, you immediately can go in, grab this stuff off of open source and get after it, and don't need anything relative to Skeleton Labs, and that's great. And that's the whole idea behind, open source stuff. But if you're somebody that is right there on the fringe, maybe don't have a lot of experience, you might be a business guy like me who's not super tech savvy. You with this particular type of setup, you give everybody a little bit of an opportunity to jump in and dip their toe in and be comfortable. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I think that's, especially in today's world, when you're talking about startups that are being created overnight and everybody wants to use, AI to create their website and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're getting a lot of people that are out looking for a solution.
Yeah.
They get there, they realize, wow, I need a whole lot more coding experience to do this or whatever.
Yeah.
This seems to me to be like a fun solution, and not to mitigate what it takes to produce a great website. I'm not trying to say that it's easy, but I think this is one of those, maybe I look at the world a different way and I relate better to Skeleton. And so, wow, I get it. I see what's going on. I may need to learn some more on it, but wow, that's a great starting point. And as you and I have talked also, we think that the window's just opening on SvelteKit. And, we've
with the recent like SvelteKit V1 launch, what was that, December, I guess? There's a lot of new eyes on this whole framework and stuff like that. And, I think we'll continue to see more and more folks kind of diving into it because, it's the same thing we went through, which was we used Angular and it served its purpose. But when we saw what Svelte and SvelteKit was doing, it's like, we're just so much more productive. We could just do so much stuff so much faster. And that's so, critical for whether you're a hobbyist or a freelancer or, a huge corporation, right? Like everybody wants to move faster so that you can get done with your work and go, enjoy your evening or whatever, right? So, just any way we can help with that. But it all kind of ties back to, again, what our original goals were with Skeleton, which was just how do we make this whole process easier? And so it's been interesting, again, to sort of see the development of that, because when we were building it as, again, for a tool for us. And so I was building it kind of at this level of like, what do I know as far as like, my experience for these couple decades, and what are the pain points and what do we avoid, that kind of thing. But when we put it out there, it went open source, it's been interesting to see the people that have came in and they're like, I'm not just brand new to Svelte, and I'm not just brand new to Tailwind. I'm brand new to web development. I've never, I'm learning all these new skills all at one time. And so, these templates and these other things like that, and these like kind of the opinionation that we have with how we build some of the features and things like that, I think that's been very helpful for a lot of folks. And we see those kind of comments all the time of, this is my first time doing it, and you've made this so much easier. And it feels really good. Like that was not what we were originally going for, but now that we've realized that, like we've really kind of like tried to buckle down and like have really good documentation and all these things that are really critical to folks that are just getting started being successful with what they're trying to do. So, yeah.
Well, and again, I think bragging on you guys again, I think it's a testament to you guys, because not only have you come up with a great concept, a great idea, y'all have done an amazing job with your documentation. You've done an amazing job with the UI and the UX of everything. I mean, I know that's in the middle of your strike zone and that's what you're good at. Mm-hmm. But if a guy like me who's purely business can get it and understand it, then then guys with a tremendous amount of expertise. Again, I say Nick and Dom and Thomas. I mean, the world, the world, you got the tiger by the tail with that, and now you've got unlimited ability to be able to go out and produce great work for yourself or for your clients.
Yeah, yeah, and again, like, I don't know if this is kind of unique for us to be just sitting here and talking about some of this stuff. I know I've used other frameworks and stuff in the past, and you usually don't see this, and part of that is because some of the folks that we're competing against, in a friendly way, are folks that are mega corporations. You've got IBM that's running Carbon, and you've got Google that's running Material, and you've got these things, and so they're building not necessarily for they're trying to build it for as wide of an audience as they can, but a lot of it's built for them and their services, and then just by happenstance that also works for other folks, and so they kind of put that out there. Whereas like I've had a few people that come in, especially like our Discord or something, and they're surprised that that's like they put in this comment. They're like expecting like nobody's going to answer me. I'm not going to see anything, and then several of the core people like myself and Dom and everybody else comes in and is like, oh yeah, let's help you with that. How are you doing? It's very friendly and kind of deal. So we're kind of in a unique, unique position that we're still kind of that small level that we can, greet you at the door kind of thing. So it's interesting, but I like it because it gives me a chance to interface directly with more of the, the community. I've had, wonderful opportunities to talk to folks all throughout the Svelte ecosystem. So Brittany Posma and a bunch of folks through that, Hunter from Huntbite, and Matthias from Joy of Code, like all these really cool talented folks that are doing really cool stuff, and we kind of get to build off of that and help each other out. Like, I mean, again, I say we're friendly competition with these other libraries like Zoltan from Flowbyte and these other folks doing really cool stuff, and I've had a chance to kind of talk with them and say, hey, you're doing great stuff, and they can say the same thing. And so, especially with stuff like that, it's been interesting to see where we can kind of work together, because I think Zoltan put this really well. It's like the whole nature of open source is this kind of collaborative effort, and so it doesn't matter if we're building this tool or that tool or whatever. If we can kind of build each other up, it's really cool. Everybody sort of wins from that. So it's just, again, It's been kind of it's been interesting to see how that kind of plays out, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well,
cool.
Yeah, I think this stream has been a major success, and I understand we're gonna do it again, right?
Yeah. So that's the goal. We tried to do. We were originally going to try to do this as like one big stream that kind of went all day, and then I realized like I was maybe biting off a little more than I can chew. So we're going to split it up, and it's also going to be very helpful for folks that are maybe in a different time zone. So. If you're US based, maybe you're busy during the day, you can come check it out. But we're going to do it about 8 p.m. CST, Central Standard Time. So if you can, please feel free to stop by. Again, we may kind of introduce a few things, who I am and that kind of stuff at the start. But then we're going to dive right into like the theme generation. I mentioned kind of this like kind of synergy or building off of like with Flowbyte and stuff. Maybe show off how you can take elements and things from Tailwind UI or Flowbyte or whatever, and kind of convert those to use those inside of your skeleton application. So like, it's not I have to use this or I have to use that. Put them together, use them together. We'll show a little bit of that. So
cool. Well, you probably need to go do something for your voice, because I'm guessing it's probably it's a wee bit strained right now.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I'm just gonna rest and relax for a little bit, and when we'll come back fresh and strong.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining me, Trey. Appreciate having you on the stream, and hopefully, this has helped, help several people in the chat. Thank you again to everybody that's joined us and watched us, especially if you've made it all the way to the end. We've gone a few hours here, so it's pretty cool. And again, if you can, please feel free to join us this evening. We'd love to have you. So. I think I'll end it there and just say thanks again, everybody, and catch you soon. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.